Close your eyes. Imagine, if you will, the flickering warmth of a hearth in a room where the shadows dance slowly against the walls. The world outside has faded away. The noise, the rush, the endless demands of the modern day. Tonight we travel backward, not to the sanitized, colourful versions of history seen in textbooks, but to the raw, pulsating and deeply human heart of Tudor England. It is a time often misunderstood, shrouded in layers of romanticized fiction and dark, persistent myths. We are often told of a realm choked by filth, a kingdom where the very air was thick with the scent of unwashed humanity and decay. But as the fire crackles softly beside us, let us peel back these layers. Was the Tudor era truly the cesspool of history? Or is that merely a convenient lie we tell ourselves to feel superior in our age of sterile convenience? The truth is a far more nuanced tapestry. While the streets of London were undoubtedly crowded, echoing with the sounds of commerce, the clatter of horse-drawn carts, and the hurried footsteps of merchants, they were not merely pits of despair. Beneath the grime of the city, there existed a deep, abiding appreciation for the virtues of cleanliness in the quiet chambers of the great houses, and even within the modest homes of the common folk. Rituals of water, soap, and linen were performed with religious devotion. They understood the cooling comfort of a fresh shirt and the dignity of a clean face. The myth of the perpetually filthy Tudor persists because we compare their reality to our modern, pressurized plumbing. But consider this, in the absence of our modern machinery, they developed their own sophisticated systems of ritual and care. They lived closer to the natural world, and in that proximity they found ways to maintain their humanity. Tonight, as we drift into the stillness, we will explore these fragments of reality, the quiet moments behind the grand declarations, the soft whispers lost in the corridors of power, and the gentle rhythm of lives lived under a very different sun. You are here to rest, to let the weight of the present settle into the embers of the past. There is no urgency here, only the steady, calming presence of history. Let the firelight guide you. Let the words wash over you like a soft tide, pulling you deeper into the quietude of a time long gone. The channel's Sleepy History with Kevin is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of positive emotional values. As the embers pulse with a steady golden glow, let your mind drift toward the image of the great monarch, Henry VIII. History often paints him in broad, static strokes, the colossal, furious king, a man whose shadow seems to stretch across every corner of the 16th century, demanding impossible loyalty and reigning through the heavy hand of execution. We see him in our mind's eye as a mountain of velvet and gold, his face flushed with the complexities of power, his temper legendary, his presence consuming the very air of the court. But this caricature, this singular image of a tyrant, is a hollow shell. It ignores the man who lived beneath the crown. If you could step back into the sun-drenched courtyards of the early 1500s, you would find someone entirely unrecognizable. The young Henry was the embodiment of the Renaissance ideal, tall, athletic, and possessed of a vibrant, restless energy that commanded the attention of every ambassador in Europe. He was a prince who lived for the challenge of the hunt, the intricate dance of the court, and the rigorous discipline of the joust. His life was a constant performance of grace and strength. He did not merely rule, he moved through his world with a fierce competitive joy. He was a scholar, a musician, and a linguist, layering his physical prowess with the sharp, inquisitive mind of a man who believed he was destined for greatness. Think of the hours he spent perfecting his stride, the pride he took in the intricate embroidery of his robes, the way he carried himself with the effortless confidence of a man who had never known the limits of his own body. Yet history is rarely a straight line of triumphs. It is a series of quiet ruptures. The turn in Henry's path did not happen overnight. It began in the moments of silence following his physical decline. A single brutal accident in the tournament ring, a fall that shattered his confidence as much as it damaged his leg, marked the beginning of a long, slow erosion. As his health faltered, as the chronic pain took hold, the vibrant prince began to recede, replaced by a king whose world was narrowing to the confines of his own suffering. It is a sobering thought, is it not? How quickly the landscape of our lives can shift when the body fails us. Imagine the psychological toll, to go from being the most capable man in the realm to being trapped in a body that betrayed you every single day. The paranoia that followed was not merely the eccentricity of a despot, but the defensive reflex of a man who felt his grip on his own narrative slipping away. He surrounded himself with walls of stone and walls of people, terrified that if the world saw his frailty, they would no longer fear his power. We often judge these historical figures by their endings, forgetting that they were, like us, subject to the gradual wear and tear of time. Henry's transformation was a slow, painful shedding of his former self, a descent into a bitterness that was nurtured by the very court he had built. He became a man who could trust no one because he could no longer trust the mirror. In the flickering light of our fire, let us hold space for that tragedy, not to excuse the choices he made, but to understand the hollow ache of a king who, in his pursuit of legacy, lost the very humanity he sought to immortalize. Lean back and let the fire's soft popping sounds ground you in the present, while our story drifts into the long, arched galleries of Tudor estates. There is a persistent whisper in history books, a suggestion that the women of this era were mere ornaments, fragile blooms kept in the quiet corners of grand houses, their voices hushed by the overwhelming roar of a patriarchal world. We are told they spent their days in solitary needlework, waiting for the commands of men to define their purpose, but as the shadows flicker, the truth begins to emerge, richer and more complex than the myth suggests. Think of the vast, sprawling estates of the time, not merely as homes, but as the pulsating engines of society. Within these walls, the lady of the house was the silent sovereign. While history books often focus on the king's court, the true architecture of stability rested upon the shoulders of women who managed these mini-kingdoms. They were the masters of logistics, the keepers of the purse, and the architects of family alliances that could shift the political balance of an entire region. To manage a great estate required a mind capable of navigating complex economic realities. These women oversaw the harvest, negotiated with stewards, ensured the health of the tenants, and directed the intricate daily operations that kept an entire community functioning. They were the ones who ensured that when the cold winter winds blew, the larders were full, the medicine chests were stocked, and the social fabric of the estate remained unbroken. This was not a passive existence, it was a life of profound responsibility, requiring a tactical understanding of human nature and a steady hand in the face of constant pressure. Consider the education of these women. They were often fluent in multiple languages, trained in theology, music, and the arts, serving as the cultural heart of their families. They understood the power of a letter, the weight of a diplomatic gesture, and the importance of soft-spoken influence. When a husband was away, attending to the king, fighting in distant campaigns, or navigating the treacherous waters of court politics, it was the wife who held the centre. She was the one who made decisions that would sustain the family line for generations. Even in the most restrictive of environments, there were those who refused to be contained by the narrow margins of their era. They exerted power through their networks, their intelligence, and their sheer force of will. Think of the letters that crossed the country, not just social pleasantries, but strategic communications detailing the state of the realm, the marriages to be arranged, and the protection of ancestral lands. They were the hidden conduits of information. As we ponder this, let the quiet strength of these women settle over you. History may have focused its brightest lights on the thrones and the battlefields, but the enduring legacy of the Tudor era was also built by these persistent, intelligent, and deeply capable individuals who navigated a world designed to overlook them. They managed the transitions, kept the peace, and nurtured the future, all while moving through a world that rarely acknowledged the full breadth of their contributions. Rest now, with the knowledge that beneath the grand narrative of kings there was a steady feminine hand steering the course of the age. The fire crackles with a rhythmic intensity, a steady beat that mimics the passage of time itself. As we sit in this shared space, we must acknowledge the delicate nature of what we are doing. History, when stripped to its barest facts, can be a cold and distant thing, a skeleton of dates and names. But when we breathe life into it, when we allow ourselves to imagine the texture of the cloth, the chill of the morning air, and the quiet fears of those who walked these halls centuries ago, we move beyond mere record-keeping. We enter the realm of the storyteller. Imagine yourself standing in a great hall in the late 1500s. The tapestries are heavy, damp with the coastal air, their colours muted by the dim light of tallow candles. A merchant is speaking to a clerk in low, urgent tones about the price of wool and the shifting tides of trade. Nearby, a young servant is carefully arranging dried herbs to mask the dampness of the stone walls. This is the world as it truly felt, not as a museum exhibit, but as a living, breathing existence. When we explore the mysteries of this age, we do so with a deep respect for the echoes of the past. Every detail, from the scent of rosemary in the kitchen to the weight of a heavy wool cloak, is a thread in a much larger tapestry. We weave these threads together, not to claim that every word is a literal transcription of a forgotten day, but to build a bridge, a way for you in the quiet of your night, to walk the corridors of the Tudor age and feel the pulse of its reality. This is the art of historical immersion. We look at the records left behind, the journals, the legal ledgers, the fragments of letters, and we see the gaps. It is in those gaps that we find the human experience. We find the person who paused before making a difficult choice. We find the mother who worried about the harvest. We find the noble who stood in the quiet of the night, staring at the moon and wondering what legacy they would leave behind. By embracing these moments, we give ourselves permission to connect with the past on a more profound emotional level. As the flames dance, remember that we are all part of this continuous human narrative. We are the inheritors of these questions, these struggles, and these small, quiet triumphs. Tonight, allow your imagination to be your guide. Let the specific details of the Tudor world be the backdrop for your own reflection. Whether it is the soft rustle of silk or the distant sound of a church bell tolling in the valley, let these sensory images carry you further away from the noise of today and into the serene, timeless landscape of history. All stories on this channel, Sleepy History with Kevin, are fictional, thoughtfully crafted around historical themes and inspired by real events, figures, and periods, reimagined for engaging storytelling. The content does not represent real individuals, actual events, or documented cases. Any resemblance to real people, animals, book events is purely coincidental. The fire has settled into a deep, rhythmic glow, casting long, gentle shadows that dance across the room. As the atmosphere grows heavy with quietude, let us turn our gaze toward the horizon, not the one you see from your window, but the one that beckoned to the dreamers and navigators of the Tudor age. There is a myth, often repeated in hushed tones, that the people of this time stood on the decks of their wooden ships, looking into the mist with a trembling fear that they might sail straight off the edge of the world. It is a compelling image, the brave explorer confronting the terrifying unknown. Yet it is entirely a fiction. The scholars, the navigators, and the educated minds of the Tudor era were far more sophisticated than we give them credit for. They knew as surely as the ancient Greeks had known long before them that the earth was a sphere. The questions that kept them awake at night were not about whether the world was round, but about how vast it truly was. They measured the stars, consulted the celestial charts, and debated the circumference of the globe with the precision of scientists. They were driven not by a fear of falling into the abyss, but by a hunger for what lay hidden beyond the known map. It was a time of immense curiosity, where a single voyage could alter the course of empires and redraw the boundaries of human understanding. Think of the men and women who stood at the ports, watching the sails disappear into the grey Atlantic. They were not witnessing an act of suicide, they were witnessing the expansion of human potential. They navigated by the rhythms of the currents and the geometry of the constellations. Every voyage was a delicate dance with nature, a challenge against the relentless winds and the shifting tides. It was in many ways the ultimate test of human resolve. As we lie here, surrounded by the comfort of the modern world, it is worth reflecting on that restless spirit of exploration. What horizons are you chasing in your own life? What uncharted territories lie in your thoughts, waiting to be navigated? If you find yourself enjoying this journey through the quiet corridors of history, I invite you to become a part of our growing community. By subscribing to the channel and leaving a comment below about what historical era fascinates you the most, you help us keep these stories alive, reaching others who, like you, seek peace and reflection in the wonders of the past. Your presence here matters, and your voice helps shape the stories we tell. Let the flickering firelight remind you that we are all explorers in our own way, navigating the vast, mysterious landscape of our own lives. The world is much larger and much more beautiful than we often allow ourselves to see. As you drift further into the stillness, let the image of those wooden ships, guided by the stars, lull you into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. The air in the room seems to grow warmer, filled with the faint imaginary scent of roasting spices, cinnamon, cloves and ginger, drifting from the great kitchens of a Tudor manor. When we speak of feasts in this era, we must move past the modern notion of simply gathering to eat. A banquet in the 16th century was a theatre, a carefully choreographed performance where every dish, every sculpture of sugar, and every arrangement of meat was a deliberate signal of status, wealth, and sophisticated hospitality. Imagine walking into a grand dining hall. The tables are groaning under the weight of dozens of dishes, arranged not just for hunger, but for visual intimidation. You see elaborate sugar sculptures, castles, mythical beasts, and sweeping landscapes rising from the centre of the table like edible monuments. There were even stories of pies that, when opened, would release live birds, a whimsical touch that surely startled the guests as much as it delighted them. It was a time when the wealthy treated a dinner party with the same level of dramatic planning as a royal procession. This was not merely about indulgence, it was about demonstrating power. To serve a roasted peacock, its iridescent feathers reattached after cooking so that it appeared to be alive and strutting across the table, was a message to every guest in the room. We possess the world, and we can command nature itself. These feasts were the social glue of the elite, where political alliances were whispered over heavy goblets of wine, and where a person's seating position at the long oak table could tell you everything you needed to know about their current favour with the crown. Yet beyond the gluttony and the performance, there was a deep reliance on the rhythms of the seasons. Without the artificial cold of modern refrigeration, the diet of a household, whether noble or common, was dictated by the cycle of the earth. In the winter months, when the frost clung to the window panes, meals became a study in preservation. Salt, smoke, and dried herbs were the guardians of their sustenance. They ate turnips, salted meats, and hearty broths, finding comfort in the simple earthy flavours that had been painstakingly saved from the abundance of summer. And let us not forget the sophistication of their seasoning. While myths suggest their food was flavourless, the reality was quite the opposite. Tudor cooks were masters of herbs. Rosemary, sage, parsley, and thyme were used with a liberal, artistic hand. They blended sweet and savoury in ways that might surprise our modern palates, creating dishes that were complex, aromatic, and deeply tied to the land they inhabited. As the fire continues to burn with a steady, soothing rhythm, think of those ancient tables. They were places of warmth, of shared stories, and of a connection to the world that we have largely lost. The effort taken to prepare a meal, the slow curing of the meat, the careful picking of the herbs, the gathering of family and friends, was an act of devotion. Tonight, as you lie in the quiet, let the memory of these feasts act as a reminder of the simpler, deeper joys of breaking bread, of being present, and of finding nourishment in the quiet company of your own thoughts. There is a profound peace in knowing that no matter how much the world changes, the act of coming together to share the warmth of a fire remains a timeless human truth. As the firelight dips and rises, casting soft flickers of amber across your surroundings, let us clear the air of another lingering myth, a story often told to make us feel modern and sophisticated by comparison. It is the tale that the people of the Tudor era were in a permanent state of mild intoxication, forced to drink ale from dawn until dusk because water was supposedly a liquid death trap. We are often told that they walked through life in a hazy, alcohol-fueled fog, as if they had no concept of hydration beyond the brewery. But step back with me into the reality of the 16th century. Life, in its purest form, always seeks out the source. The people of the Tudor era were deeply connected to the natural world around them. They knew the land, the springs and the rivers as intimately as we know the geography of our own digital screens. Wells, mountain springs and clear-flowing streams were not just sources of water, they were the lifelines of every village, every manor and every farm. They understood through generations of observation which waters were sweet and clear and which were to be avoided. It is true that in the burgeoning, crowded cities like London, where the streets were narrow and the inhabitants dense, water quality could indeed suffer. When humanity gathers in such close proximity without the structures of modern sanitation, the environment bears the weight of that growth. But to suggest that a farmer in the rolling hills of the countryside was drinking ale because he was afraid to drink from a crystal-clear mountain spring is a misunderstanding of their survival skills. They were observant, practical, and remarkably adept at finding the best life-giving resources their environment offered. Water was, and always has been, the first choice of life. It was used in their cooking, in the infusion of their herbal teas, and in the washing that kept them clean. The ale they drank was not a desperate substitute, it was a nutritious social and cultural staple, often brewed with grains and herbs to sustain the body through long hours of physical labour. It was a complement to their lives, not a frantic escape from them. Think of the clarity of a morning stream, untouched by the noise of the city, flowing over smooth stones and mossy banks. That was the reality for the majority of the population. They were closer to the source than we are today. They respected the water, they watched the seasons change the flow of the rivers, and they understood that clean water was a gift to be protected. As you sit here, enveloped in the quiet of this moment, feel that same clarity. Imagine the cool, crisp sensation of a natural spring, the way it grounds you and refreshes your spirit. There is no need for the rush or the chaotic noise of the modern world. You are here in the present, finding peace in the simple, fundamental truths of existence. Let the rhythm of the fire wash away the need for complexity, and let the image of a quiet, flowing stream guide you toward a deeper sense of stillness. You are drifting naturally and peacefully into the calm center of your own rest. The fire has burned down to a rich, glowing bed of embers, casting long, contemplative shadows that seem to hold their own secrets. In this stillness, let us turn our attention to the whispers that remain in the corners of history, the mysteries that even time has failed to resolve. The Tudor era was not just a time of courts and commerce, it was a time of immense transition, where the old world of superstition met the new light of inquiry, leaving behind tales that defy simple explanation. Have you ever wondered about the figures who vanished into the silence of the tower, or the documents that were burned to protect a crown's reputation? There are stories that linger in the archives, half-remembered legends of lost jewellery, secret passages in crumbling abbeys, and whispers of political plots that were silenced before they could be recorded. These are the ghosts of history, not necessarily spirits in the traditional sense, but the unresolved energy of human ambition and fear that still vibrates through the centuries. We often look at the past as a finished book, a settled account, but history is much more like a living river. Every time we re-examine an event, every time we uncover a hidden letter or a long-lost diary, the narrative shifts, revealing new layers of meaning. Think of the figures we have discussed tonight: the king who transformed, the women who led from the shadows, the explorers who mapped a spherical world. Each of them left behind a trail of unanswered questions, small puzzles that invite us to lean in and listen closer. This is the beauty of our journey together. It is not just about what we know, but about what we allow ourselves to wonder. Whether you're seeking a moment of quiet reflection, a deep dive into historical intrigue, or simply the soothing sound of a story unfolding, you are exactly where you need to be. If this journey into the mysteries of the past has resonated with you, I invite you to help us expand this circle of reflection. By subscribing to the channel and sharing this video with a friend who appreciates the depth of history, you are helping us build a sanctuary of quiet, thoughtful content. Your support allows us to continue weaving these stories, to keep the fires of curiosity burning, and to ensure that these historical voices are never truly silenced by the passage of time. Thank you for being a part of this quiet community. As you listen to the gentle crackle of the fireplace, let your mind become an archive of these wonders. Do not feel the need to solve every puzzle or find every answer tonight. Allow the mysteries to remain, like the stars above a vast dark sea. There is peace in the unknown, and there is rest in the gentle acknowledgement that we are but small, significant parts of a much larger, unfolding story. Let the fire hold the weight of these mysteries for you, while you drift into a state of serene, untroubled sleep. The firelight is now a soft, pulsing orange, a steady heartbeat in the darkness. We have walked the halls of kings and navigated the treacherous political waters of the court, but now let us step outside the stone walls. Let us walk into the open, rolling landscape of the Tudor countryside, where the sky is the only clock that truly matters. For the vast majority of the people during this time, life was not defined by royal decrees or the shifting alliances of foreign powers. It was defined by the soil, the rain, and the relentless, beautiful turning of the seasons. Imagine a morning where the mist hangs low over the fields, clinging to the damp grass like a soft shroud. The silence is broken only by the distant lowing of cattle or the rhythmic sound of a scythe moving through tall golden wheat. This was the pulse of the nation, a quiet, enduring vitality that fed the cities and supported the thrones, yet rarely received the tribute it deserved. Think of the cycle of the year. Spring was a time of hopeful labour, when the ground was turned and the seeds were cast with a silent prayer for a bountiful harvest. Summer was the season of sweat and long grueling days under a relentless sun, where the entire community would come together to bring in the hay. There was an inherent cooperation in this way of life. Neighbours depended on neighbours, not just for survival, but for the simple human connection that made the hard work bearable. As autumn approached, the landscape would transform into a tapestry of gold and russet. This was a time of gathering, of preparing the larders, of storing the fruits of the labour to see them through the long, biting chill of winter, and then winter the season of stillness. The world would draw inward. In the small, timber-framed cottages, the hearth became the centre of the universe. It was here, by the light of a single flickering flame, that stories were told, that memories were passed down, and that the spirit of the family was maintained against the encroaching cold. These lives were not small in meaning. Even if they were quiet in their expression, they possessed a depth of connection to the natural world that we, in our climate-controlled, illuminated age, have largely forgotten. They knew the precise moment when the frost would turn the leaves, when the first bird of spring would sing, and when the earth was ready to rest. They lived in harmony with the cycles of nature, finding beauty in the harvest and resilience in the endurance of the winter. As you lie in the comfort of your own space, try to connect with that ancient, rhythmic life. Feel the weight of the seasons as they turn in your own existence. There is a profound simplicity in the way these people lived, a reminder that at our core, we are part of the earth, part of the cycle and part of the vast natural world. Let the flickering fire here be your connection to that past, a warm, steady beacon that bridges the distance between their quiet fields and your own peaceful rest. You are drifting into a rhythm that is as old as the hills themselves. The fire is now a gentle, low glow, casting a tranquil warmth that seems to seep into the very marrow of the room. We have travelled far tonight, from the bustling, mud-strewn streets of London to the quiet, rolling expanse of the countryside. We have looked into the eyes of monarchs and stood in the shadows of those who tended the land. As the embers pulse with their final steady light, let us take a moment to consider what truly remains of this era. History is rarely about the grand events that make it into the textbooks. It is about the quiet continuity of human experience, the clothes they wore, the food they grew, the fears they held, and the hopes they whispered into the dark. These are the true threads that bind us to them. We are not so different from the people of the Tudor age. We too seek security in an uncertain world. We too find comfort in the rhythm of our daily rituals. We too look at the stars and wonder about the vastness of the horizon. Their legacy is not found in the crumbling stone of their castles, but in the enduring spirit of inquiry, the resilience in the face of hardship, and the simple human desire to create a home both in the world and in our own hearts. They built a foundation of language, of law, and of culture, upon which our modern lives are precariously perched. To look back at them is, in many ways, to look into a mirror. Before we drift into the final, silent reaches of the night, I want to thank you for walking this path with me. Your presence here, in the shared space of this story, is what gives it life. If you have found a measure of peace, a spark of curiosity, or simply a moment of rest in these tales, consider sharing this experience. Subscribe to the channel, join our community of listeners, and let us know in the comments what era of history brings you the most comfort. Your stories, your reflections, and your presence are the final threads that complete this tapestry. As the fire dims, let the weight of the day slip from your shoulders. You have journeyed through the past, and you have arrived safely here in the present, in the sanctuary of your own rest. There is nothing left to do, no more to uncover, and no more to resolve. The past is resting, the future is waiting, and you are here, safe and still. Let the gentle warmth of these final embers carry you into the deep, restorative silence of a long night's sleep. The fire has been replenished with fresh logs, sending a cascade of warm, golden sparks upward to meet the dark ceiling. In this revitalized warmth, let us move away from the grand narratives of kings and the labor of the fields, and instead focus on the intimate, often overlooked world of manners and grace. The Tudor era is frequently characterized by its turbulence, but beneath the surface there existed a rigid and fascinating structure of etiquette that governed how people interacted with one another. To dine, to walk, or to speak in the courtly circles of the 16th century was to engage in a complex, silent language. Imagine the posture of a courtier, the measured steps, the precise inclination of the head, the careful choice of words in a room where a single misstep could mean social isolation. These were not mere affectations, they were the tools with which individuals carved out their space in a world of constant, shifting allegiances. Think of the banquet table again, not for the spectacle, but for the order. How a guest was served, the specific way in which a cloth was laid, the sequence of dishes, all of these followed a rhythm as predictable as the tides. For the people of that time, this structure provided a sense of stability in an age where the political ground could shift overnight. It was a way of creating order out of chaos, of reminding one another of their place in the larger divine tapestry. Yet this was not confined to the nobility. Even in the humblest villages, there were social contracts, unspoken agreements on how to greet a neighbour, how to offer hospitality to a traveller, and how to mark the passages of life from birth to death. These rituals were the threads that held the social fabric together, ensuring that even in hard times there was a sense of decorum and shared humanity. As we sit in the quiet glow of our own fireplace, let us reflect on our own rituals. Do we pause long enough to appreciate the small gestures of kindness? Do we find value in the way we communicate with one another? Or have we allowed the speed of our modern life to strip away the grace of the moment? There is a profound meditative quality in observing the patterns of human behavior, in understanding that no matter how much the world changes, the desire to be seen, to be respected, and to be connected remains at the heart of every interaction. Let the rhythmic popping of the fire act as a metronome for your thoughts. You are no longer required to adhere to any schedule. The world outside has no claim on you. In this space, you can let go of the need for performative grace. You are safe, you are comfortable, and you are free to simply exist. As you listen, let the idea of these ancient rituals settle into your consciousness, not as rules to be followed, but as a testament to the human need for order, beauty, and connection. This content is inspired by and adapted from public domain works available through Project Gutenberg. The material has been transformed through original narration, editing, and storytelling to create a unique experience for educational and entertainment purposes. The firelight dances with a gentle, hypnotic grace, casting a warm amber glow that softens the edges of the room. As we sink deeper into this quiet space, I want to invite you to look past the stone castles and the velvet robes and focus on the hands that made them. The Tudor era was a time of extraordinary craftsmanship, a period where the mastery of materials was not just a trade, but a way of understanding the world. Think of the weaver in a draughty cottage sitting before a heavy wooden loom. The rhythmic clack-clack-clack of the shuttle moving back and forth is the heartbeat of a community. They are not merely creating fabric, they are recording the patterns of their lives, selecting the wool from their own flocks, spinning the thread with a patient, practiced focus that has been passed down through generations. There is a profound meditation in this repetitive action, a singular, dedicated commitment to creating something of quality, something that will outlast the hands that made it. Consider the woodworker, his tools polished by years of use, carving intricate details into the heavy oak of a family table. He works with a quiet respect for the grain of the wood, understanding its history, its resilience, and the life it once lived in, the deep ancient forests. Every notch, every smooth curve, is a conversation between the artisan and the natural world. In a time before mass production, every item, be it a simple chair, a sturdy chest, or a decorative panel, carried the unique imprint of the person who poured their time and energy into its creation. These artisans were the unsung heroes of their time. They were the ones who turned raw materials into the architecture of daily life. They understood that beauty was not a luxury, but a fundamental human necessity. Even in the smallest, most functional objects, there was a desire to add a touch of grace, a bit of detail that spoke to the dignity of the person who would use it. As you lie here listening to the soft crackle of the fire, think about the objects that surround you in your own life. Each of them, in its own way, is the result of a long lineage of craft, of human ingenuity, and of the desire to make the world a more comfortable, more beautiful place. There is a comforting continuity in this. We are connected to the past through the things we use, the spaces we inhabit, and the simple, enduring value of work done well. There is no need for you to be productive tonight. You are not a machine. You are a living, breathing part of this ongoing human story. Let the images of these quiet, diligent artisans soothe your mind. Feel the rhythm of their work, the steady, patient pace that honors the material and respects the time. Let that rhythm guide you away from the frantic pace of the present. You are settling into a deeper sense of peace, where the only thing that matters is the warmth of the fire and the quiet, restorative stillness of the night. The fire has settled into a soft, glowing hum, the perfect accompaniment to the quiet we are about to enter. As the embers pulse with a gentle, steady light, let your mind drift through the heavy wooden doors of a manor house and out into the crisp, scented air of a Tudor garden. We often imagine the gardens of the 16th century as rigid, overly geometric displays, all box hedges clipped into precise shapes and gravel paths laid out with mathematical rigour. While there was certainly a love for order and symmetry, there was also a profound, quiet purpose to these spaces. They were not merely ornamental, they were sanctuaries. Imagine walking along a path lined with fragrant lavender, rosemary, and hyssop. The air is thick with the scent of herbs, a natural perfume that calms the senses and slows the pulse. In the heart of the garden, perhaps tucked behind a high stone wall covered in climbing roses, sat a small, secluded bench here. Away from the intrigue of the court and the demands of the estate, one could sit and listen to the world exist on its own terms. The bees buzzing among the flowers, the distant song of a thrush in the hedgerow, the soft rustle of leaves as a gentle breeze passes through. These were the sounds that anchored the soul. The Tudor gardeners understood something that we often overlook: the restorative power of a cultivated, peaceful space. They saw the garden as a reflection of the divine order, a way to bring a piece of paradise down to earth. By creating a boundary between the wild, unpredictable landscape and the refined, orderly beauty of the garden, they were creating a space for reflection. It was a place where one could contemplate the beauty of a single flower, the intricate structure of a leaf, or the steady, unwavering growth of a perennial vine. Think of the patience required to tend such a garden. It is a slow, season-by-season process of pruning, planting and nurturing. There is no shortcut to the beauty of a garden in full bloom. It is the culmination of countless quiet hours of care. This is a lesson for us too, in our lives. We are often too focused on the result, forgetting that the true value lies in the process, in the act of tending to our own inner landscapes, in taking the time to nurture our thoughts, and in allowing ourselves the space to simply grow at our own pace. As you lie in the quiet of your room, let the image of this garden bloom in your mind. Picture the sunlight filtering through the leaves, the soft colours of the flowers, and the profound stillness that hangs over the entire scene. Feel the tension of your day loosening, petal by petal, until you are as relaxed and open as a flower in the morning sun. You are in a safe, peaceful space, shielded from the rush of the outside world, just as the secret garden was shielded from the noise of the estate. Let this quietude fill you, calm you, and guide you toward a deeper, more profound rest. The fire crackles with a deep, resonant sound, filling the room with the comfort of 1,000 stories told over 1,000 nights. As we drift further into the stillness, I want you to imagine a space quite unlike any we have visited yet, the quiet, dust-moted sanctuary of a Tudor library. In an age before the digital rush, where information was painstakingly copied by hand or carefully printed on heavy cream-coloured parchment, a library was not just a collection of objects, it was a treasure house of human thought. Step inside, and the first thing you notice is the scent. It is the earthy, rich aroma of aged paper, leather bindings, and the faint, sweet trace of beeswax used to polish the dark, solid oak shelving. It is a smell that promises timelessness. In the soft, diffused light filtering through a leaded glass window, imagine a scholar sitting at a heavy wooden desk, an open book before him. He is not skimming for headlines, he is reading with a slow, deliberate intensity. He traces the flow of the calligraphy, the ink occasionally bleeding slightly into the fibre of the page, telling the history of its own creation. Each book was a monumental investment, an object of beauty that commanded respect. To hold one was to hold a piece of someone else's mind, a connection that spanned decades, perhaps centuries. There was a profound silence in these spaces, a heavy velvet silence that seemed to absorb the worries of the world outside. Here, the political schemes, the courtly rumours, and the demands of the day were replaced by the eternal questions of philosophy, the rhythm of poetry, and the meticulous records of history. It was a place where one could lose track of the hours, where the linear progression of time seemed to dissolve into the circular wisdom of the written word. Think of the patience of the scribes and the early printers who treated each page as a canvas for truth. They understood that knowledge, if it were to last, required a steady hand and a quiet environment. This dedication to the written word created a sanctuary for the human spirit. It allowed for reflection in an age that was, in its own way, as loud and demanding as our own. As you lie here, allow yourself to be surrounded by the imaginary weight of these volumes. Let their presence be an anchor for your mind. You are drifting into the same quietude that the scholars of the past cherished. There is no need for you to seek answers or to perform. There is only the pleasure of being in a space filled with wisdom and calm. Let the stillness of the library wrap around you like a heavy, warm cloak. The world is far away, the night is deep, and you are resting in the peaceful embrace of history's most enduring stories. Everything is quiet, everything is still. The fire has softened into a gentle, pulsating warmth, casting a hue of deep velvet across the room. As the night deepens, let us listen to the sounds that once drifted through the halls of the Tudor age, not the clamour of the city or the debates of the court, but the fragile, ethereal notes of a lute, played in the quiet of a candlelit chamber. Music in the 16th century was much more than entertainment. It was believed to be a reflection of the harmony of the spheres, the idea that the universe itself was composed of mathematical proportions and divine order. To play an instrument or even to sing was a form of meditation, a way to align the human spirit with the natural rhythms of creation. Imagine a single note of a lute vibrating in the stillness, the sound blooming like a flower, and then slowly, gracefully fading into the darkness. It was a sound that didn't demand attention, but rather invited it. Think of the instruments themselves, crafted from woods that had seasoned for years, strings made of natural fibres, and resonance chambers that carried the warmth of the artisan's touch. When a musician sat down to play, they weren't just executing a piece of music, they were engaging in a conversation with the acoustics of the room, with the silence that surrounded them. There was no amplification, no digital manipulation, only the pure, unvarnished expression of a human soul responding to the moment. For the people of the Tudor era, this music was a respite, whether it was the lively rhythm of a folk dance in a village square or the intricate polyphony of a courtly song. It served to lift the heavy burdens of existence. It was a way to weave beauty into the fabric of daily life, to acknowledge the hardships they faced while simultaneously celebrating the capacity for joy. As you lie in the stillness, let your imagination recreate that quiet music. Feel the vibrations of the strings resonating in the air, a gentle pulse that matches the beating of your own heart. Notice how the sound creates a space of its own, a sanctuary of resonance where no worry or tension can penetrate. You are being lulled by the echoes of a time when beauty was a necessary part of the environment, a quiet constant that helped maintain the balance of the mind. There is no rush to reach the end of the melody. Let each note be an invitation to let go a little more. You are not listening to music from the past, you're experiencing the timeless quality of harmony. It is in the space between the notes that you find your rest, the place where the world fades away and only the calm, unwavering presence of your own existence remains. Let the music, real or imagined, guide you deeper into the velvet darkness of the night, where you are safe, where you are still, and where the harmony of the world is perfectly aligned with your own need for sleep. The fire beside us has grown smaller, its light flickering with a soft, steady rhythm that seems to sync with the very pulse of the house. Outside the night is deep and cold, a vast silent expanse of winter frost that turns the world into a landscape of silver and shadow. But here, within the circle of our hearth, time holds its breath. In the 16th century, the fireplace was far more than just a source of warmth. It was the sacred centre of existence. As the winter nights stretched into interminable darkness, the hearth became the focal point of the home, a place where life was sustained and protected against the encroaching chill. Imagine a family gathered around the glowing embers. the children listening to the elders' voice as they spun tales of old legends, of heroes and wonders that seemed to take form in the dancing shadows on the walls. There was a profound intimacy in this gathering. As the wind howled against the heavy wooden shutters, the people inside drew closer, their voices softened by the warmth of the fire. They shared their meals, their worries and their hopes, all within the safe harbour of the flickering light. The fire demanded constant attention, a piece of wood to be added, an ember to be stirred, a small necessary labour that reminded everyone of their shared responsibility to keep the life of the home burning. Think of the contrast, the brutal, uncaring cold of the outside world, and the gentle, nurturing warmth of the hearth. It was in this balance that they found their resilience. They understood that the winter was not a time to be feared, but a time to turn inward, to cherish the quiet, to strengthen the bonds of family, and to wait for the inevitable return of the sun. The fireplace was a promise, kept night after night, that the darkness would never fully win. As you lie here, let the image of that ancient hearth become your own. Feel the warmth radiating from the logs, a heat that seeps into your bones and melts away the remnants of the day's tension. You are enveloped in a sanctuary of your own making, safe from the cold, safe from the noise, and safe from the demands of the world. The night is meant for rest, and you have earned this stillness. Let the rhythmic crackle of the wood be the only sound you follow. Each pop and hiss is a tiny punctuation mark in the story of your own comfort. There is nothing left to achieve tonight, no task left to complete, and no future to worry about. The fire is burning, the house is still, and your body is sinking into the soft velvet darkness of deep, restorative sleep. Everything is as it should be. You are at peace. The fire has settled into a soft, glowing pulse, casting a warm amber light that feels like a quiet embrace as you lie in the stillness. Let your imagination leave the confines of the room and wander out into the cool, misty air of a landscape long ago. We are stepping onto the ancient pathways of the Tudor countryside, winding, unpaved roads that were shaped not by the blueprints of engineers, but by the steady, unhurried footsteps of those who walked them for centuries. Travelling in the 16th century was a slow, deliberate act. There was no rush to arrive, no demand to condense distance into mere minutes. To travel from one village to the next was to engage in a sensory journey. You would pass through fields where the morning dew still clung to the wild grasses, and traverse through ancient woodlands where the sunlight filtered through the canopy in soft shifting shafts of gold. The rhythm of travel was the rhythm of the horse's gait, the creak of the wooden wheels, and the quiet observation of the changing world around you. Think of the stillness of these paths. There was no hum of engines, no distant roar of traffic to fracture the silence. Instead, you would hear the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird hidden in the thicket, and the soft sound of your own breathing. It was a journey that allowed the mind to expand, to settle into the present moment. You were not just moving through space, you were moving through time, following the same tracks that had been walked by generations of travellers before you. There was a profound humility in this way of movement. You were small, a tiny part of a vast unfolding landscape. You relied on the landmarks you knew, the ancient oak tree, the stone bridge spanning a quiet stream, the distant spire of a village church rising above the tree line. These markers provided a sense of place and belonging, a reminder that you were always connected to the earth beneath your feet. As you rest tonight, let this sense of slow, rhythmic movement guide you. Imagine yourself walking along one of these ancient paths, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the natural world. Every step is light, every breath is easy. There is no destination you need to reach, no pressure to arrive. You are simply moving through a beautiful, tranquil landscape, guided by the gentle, steady beat of your own heart. Let the image of the path dissolve into the darkness, leaving only a sense of profound, undisturbed peace. You are safe, you are grounded, and you are entirely at ease. The night is a vast, calm ocean, and you are drifting on its surface, carried by the gentle currents of history and the soothing, rhythmic stillness of your own mind. Let the day fade completely until there is nothing left but the quiet, restorative gift of sleep. The embers in our fireplace are now a soft, glowing deep red, casting a tranquil, almost meditative light that anchors us firmly in this moment. As the world outside sleeps, let your mind drift to the great stone structures of the Tudor era, the towering castles and fortified manors that stood as silent sentinels against the passing of time. Imagine, if you will, a clear, cool night where the moon is full, casting a silver glow over the rugged grey stone of a castle wall. These structures were built to last, designed with a heavy, deliberate permanence that defies the fleeting nature of our daily concerns. The stone was quarried from the earth itself, shaped by the hands of craftsmen who understood that they were building for a legacy far beyond their own lifespans. To stand near such a wall is to feel a profound, grounded sense of stability. These walls have seen generations come and go. They have heard the soft whispers of secrets in the dark and the echoing footsteps of history as it unfolded. Yet they remain unchanged, a testament to the human desire for shelter, protection, and endurance. There is something deeply soothing about the presence of such ancient stone. It doesn't ask anything of you. It doesn't demand your attention. It simply provides a solid, unwavering presence that makes you feel safe. Think of the way these structures held the quiet of the night, even in the height of the Tudor era, when the air was filled with the bustle of court politics or the labour of estate management. The interior of these great stone halls remained cool, quiet, and removed. They were spaces of reflection where the outside world could not penetrate. The thickness of the stone walls acted as a barrier, not just against the wind and the cold, but against the noise of human ambition and the rush of time itself. As you lie in your own bed tonight, allow yourself to feel that same sense of being protected. Imagine yourself within the deep, secure walls of one of these ancient structures, where the stone provides a firm, immovable foundation for your rest. You are wrapped in silence. You are held in a space where time has no meaning, where the only thing that exists is the quiet, steady beat of your own life, protected by the stillness of the night. There is a beautiful, heavy comfort in this image. You do not need to be anywhere else. You do not need to be anyone else. You are simply here in a sanctuary that is as solid and enduring as the stones of an ancient castle. Let the cold silver light of the moon in your imagination merge with the fading warmth of our fire, creating a perfect, balanced atmosphere of peace. Everything is settled. Everything is secure. You are drifting into the deepest, most restorative sleep, carried by the quiet, immovable strength of history itself. The fire has softened into a gentle, pulsating rhythm, a steady amber glow that feels as familiar as a heartbeat. In this quiet, let us turn our gaze to a different kind of memory, not of stone and duty, but of the soft human moments that illuminated the Tudor night. Imagine a village green, the grass still holding the coolness of the evening, and above a vast velvet sky dusted with a million brilliant stars. There were times, after the harvest was gathered and the long days of labour had reached their end, when the community would come together. It was not a grand display of power or a choreographed courtly event, but a simple, spontaneous gathering. A musician would bring out a fiddle or a pipe, and the air would fill with a melody that was as ancient and as natural as the wind in the trees. People would move in simple circling patterns, their laughter rising into the night air, their steps falling in time with the music. Think of the joy in that motion, not a frantic rush to keep pace, but a gentle flowing dance that emphasized connection. You held the hand of your neighbour, you shared the rhythm, and for a few precious hours, the burdens of life were laid aside. There was no hierarchy here, only the shared experience of being alive, of moving together under the watchful, silent gaze of the stars. It was a moment of grace, a brief suspension of time where everything felt perfectly in balance. The Tudor era, for all its complexities, held space for these moments of profound simplicity. They understood that to work hard required the counterbalance of resting well and finding joy in the small communal pleasures. They knew that the strength of a village was found not in its walls, but in the ties that bound one person to another, a shared song, a shared dance, a shared silence in the middle of the night. As you lie in the quiet of your room, let the memory of that starlit dance wash over you. You are part of that same human rhythm. The stresses of your day are like the dust of the road, settling now, leaving you clean and clear. You don't need to perform or to keep pace with the world. You only need to exist, to breathe, and to let the peace of the night settle into your heart. Feel the lightness that comes with letting go. The music of the past is a soft background hum that keeps you company. You are in a vast, calm space, held by the same stars that looked down upon those ancient dancers. You are safe, you are connected, and you are drifting further into a state of deep, undisturbed rest. The dance is over, the night is still, and you are ready for the quiet, endless journey of sleep. Everything is soft, everything is calm, everything is fine. The fire is now a whisper of warmth, a fading glow that matches the slowing rhythm of your own breath. We have travelled far tonight, through the corridors of stone and memory, across the sun-drenched fields, and into the quiet sanctuaries of the Tudor world. We have seen the king in his frailty, and the artisan in his grace. We have walked the ancient paths, and stood beneath the silent, starlit sky. As we reach the conclusion of this quiet exploration, reflect for a moment on the continuity of all things. The same moon that illuminated the Tudor countryside shines down upon your home tonight. The same need for peace, for connection, and for rest that guided those who lived centuries ago is the very same need that guides you now. We are all part of an endless unfolding story, linked by the simple, enduring truths of being human. There is no longer any need to reach for the past, just as there is no need to worry about the future. The archive of history is closed for the night, its stories resting in the deep, quiet foundation of time. All the characters, all the events, and all the mysteries we have pondered are now merely echoes drifting into the vast calm ocean of your subconscious. You are no longer an observer of history, you are simply a presence, existing in the safety of the present moment. The world outside has vanished, leaving only the sanctuary of this room and the infinite restorative space of your own mind. As you drift into the absolute silence, know that you have arrived exactly where you need to be. There is nothing to do, nowhere to go, and nothing left to think about. You are drifting away further and further into the velvet darkness where dreams are born and rest is absolute. Sleep is here, waiting for you, soft and inevitable. Let go now. Drift. Rest. Everything is still. The fire has been mended with fresh wood, the flames rising with a renewed crackling vitality that fills the room with warmth. Let us now turn our focus to a corner of the Tudor world that was often overlooked by the chroniclers of kings, yet was the very foundation of daily survival, the apothecary garden. Imagine a small walled plot of land, tucked neatly behind a modest timber-framed cottage. The air here is heavy, not with the dust of the road, but with the potent essential perfumes of sage, lavender, rosemary, and feverfew. In the 16th century, the home was also a hospital, and the woman or man of the house was often the village healer. This was a world where science and nature were not yet divided, where a cup of chamomile tea was understood to soothe not just the stomach, but the restlessness of the spirit. Think of the meticulous care taken in gathering these plants. The harvest was timed according to the sun and the moon, a rhythmic practice that anchored people to the seasons. The plants were dried in the rafters, their leaves crisp and fragrant, waiting to be ground in a mortar or steeped in hot water. There was a profound, quiet wisdom in this, the understanding that the earth provided exactly what was needed to balance the body and the mind. It was a practice of patience, of waiting for the plant to bloom, of trusting in the slow, natural cycles of growth. In our modern lives, we often look for instant solutions, for quick fixes to the stresses that weigh upon us. But the Tudor healer knew that true restoration requires time. To prepare a salve or to brew a tonic was an act of meditative devotion. It required one to be present, to be observant, and to respect the subtle, quiet power of the natural world. As you sit in the quiet of this night, imagine yourself in that garden. Feel the gentle texture of the herbs between your fingers. Breathe in the calming, earthy scents that have brought relief to so many before you. There is a deep, ancient comfort in knowing that nature is always there, ready to soothe, ready to mend. You are not separate from this world, you are a part of it. Let the image of the garden be a reminder of your own capacity for healing. Whatever tensions you have brought with you into this night, let them be tempered by the stillness of this thought. You are allowed to take the time you need to recover, to be patient with your own process of rest, and to trust that your body and your mind know exactly how to return to a state of balance. The fire is warm, the night is quiet, and you are drifting further into a state of deep, restorative peace, nurtured by the simple, enduring wisdom of the earth. The fire is now a steady, glowing heart in the centre of the room, its light stretching out to touch the corners of the space. As we settle deeper into this late hour, let us reflect on the precious, intentional nature of light in the 16th century. In a world where the night was truly, profoundly dark, the act of bringing light into a room was not merely functional, it was a ceremony of domestic comfort. Think of the rushlight, a simple sturdy reed dipped in rendered animal fat, placed in an iron holder, or the taper, a thin hand-dipped candle that burned with a soft persistent flame. These were the modest tools that kept the darkness at bay. To light such a lamp was to draw a boundary around oneself, to create an island of warmth and visibility in a vast, silent sea of shadows. It was in the flicker of these lights that the evening's work was finished, that the final stories were read, and that the family drew together in the shared solace of the hearth. There was a different quality to this light. It was not the cold, constant glare of our modern age. It was a living, breathing thing. It wavered with the slightest movement of the air. It cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to turn the walls into a canvas for the imagination, and it warmed the very air around it. To sit in the glow of a candle or a small oil lamp was to experience the night in a way that encouraged introspection. It was a light that didn't demand you be productive. It invited you to simply be. In those hours, the architecture of the home seemed to soften. The sharp edges of the furniture melted into the dark, and the focus narrowed to the immediate circle of warmth. It is a feeling we can still capture today. When you dim the lights in your own space, when you allow the shadows to stretch and deepen, you are reclaiming that ancient human need for a quiet, protected environment. You are creating a sanctuary where the chaos of the day cannot follow you. As you lie here, listening to the soft sounds of your own environment, imagine the gentle flickering light of a dozen candles placed around the room. Feel how that light softens the atmosphere, how it invites your eyes to close, and how it encourages your mind to let go of the day's events. You are drifting into a state of quiet grace where there is no need to see beyond the immediate, peaceful circle of your own rest. The darkness is not a void, it is a rest. The light is not a necessity, it is a comfort. You are balanced here, in the gentle interplay of warmth and stillness. Let the image of that soft glow be your guide, leading you further away from the wakeful world and into the quiet, welcoming depths of sleep. You are safe, you are warm, you are ready to rest. The fire has diminished to a soft, pulsing ember, the kind of light that exists only in the deepest moments of the night, as the house settles into silence. Let us turn our attention to the threshold of sleep itself, a transition that was as profound for a Tudor villager as it is for you. In an age when the boundaries between the waking world and the realm of the subconscious were felt more acutely, sleep was a sacred, guarded state. Imagine the quiet of an old timber-framed house after the last candle has been extinguished. The wooden beams, seasoned by centuries of heat and cold, seem to groan softly as the house relaxes into the cooling night. The air is cool, carrying the faint, clean scent of the earth outside, and the only sound is the rhythmic, reassuring beat of the night's own pulse. This was the time when the day's work was truly laid down, the tools were set aside, the heavy doors were barred, and the soul was allowed to wander. In the 16th century, people had a different relationship with the night. They understood that sleep was not just a physical necessity, it was a psychological sanctuary. In a life that could be fraught with uncertainty, the hours of rest were the only time when one was truly free. There were no demands, no hierarchy, and no expectations. In the safety of the dark, the mind could untangle the knots of the day, release the burdens of the heart, and find a quiet, unadorned peace. Think of the simplicity of their resting places, a heavy wool blanket, a straw-filled mattress that held the warmth of the body, and the encompassing protective darkness of a room tucked away from the world. It was a space that demanded nothing but your presence. It was a space where you were held, not by walls or laws, but by the natural cycle of the night itself. As you lie here, let that same sense of freedom wash over you. You're at the edge of that same sanctuary. The worries that felt so significant in the daylight have lost their weight. They are merely shadows in the moonlight, dissolving now into the calm. You're in a safe, protected space. You are wrapped in the comfort of your own environment, where the only thing that matters is the easy, natural rhythm of your breathing. Feel yourself becoming lighter, as if the very edges of your awareness are softening. You are not losing consciousness. You are simply stepping into a deeper, more profound kind of being. Let go of the desire to hold on to the day. Let go of the need to plan the morning. There is only this moment, and in this moment you are perfectly at rest. The night is deep, the silence is complete, and you are drifting into the absolute quiet of a dreamless, restorative sleep. Everything is still, everything is fine. The firelight flickers against the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows that seem to echo the restless energy of London in the mid-16th century. To understand the heart of the Tudor age, we must look beyond the throne room and into the narrow, bustling streets of the capital, where a new kind of power was quietly taking root. We are no longer talking about the feudal lords of the old world. We are talking about the merchants, the men who gambled their fortunes on the tides of the Atlantic. Imagine the port of London. The air is thick with the brine of the Thames, the scent of exotic spices from the east, and the heavy, musky smell of raw wool, the backbone of the English economy. For generations, the nobility had defined power through land ownership, through the miles of countryside their ancestors had held since the conquest. But under the Tudors, a seismic shift began. A ship returning from the Low Countries or venturing toward the uncertain horizon of the New World brought back more than just goods. It brought the seeds of a new social order. This was a high-stakes gamble. A single merchant might invest his entire inheritance into a fleet of carracks, knowing that a violent storm or a political blockade could erase his name from the guild records overnight. Yet it was this very uncertainty that fueled the dynamism of the era. The Tudor monarchs, particularly Elizabeth the Fur-Eyed, recognised that the true strength of England lay not just in the loyalty of its dukes, but in the wealth of its entrepreneurs. They granted charters, protected trade routes, and in doing so inadvertently birthed a middle class that would eventually challenge the very foundations of the monarchy itself. Think of the political consequences of this trade. As the merchants gained wealth, they gained influence. They began to build manor houses that rivaled the ancestral homes of the old aristocracy. They demanded a seat at the table in Parliament, not because of their lineage, but because they held the purse strings of the kingdom. The crown in turn became dependent on their taxes to fund the naval expansion necessary to secure their global ambitions. It was a symbiotic, yet fragile power dynamic, a constant negotiation between the divine right of kings and the pragmatic reality of the marketplace. The ripple effects of this change were felt in every village. When a wool merchant in the Cotswolds prospered, it meant more grazing land was needed, which led to the enclosure movement, where common fields were fenced off for private sheep farming. This changed the landscape of England forever, displacing families who had worked the same soil for centuries. It was the birth of early modern capitalism, a process that brought prosperity to some and displacement to others, forever altering the social fabric of the nation. As you sit in the quiet of this room, consider the weight of these historical shifts. We are looking at the moment the world began to shrink, connected by lines of credit and cargo. This was not just a story of money, it was the story of how a nation redefined itself. It was the moment England realized that its destiny was not tethered solely to the fields of Europe, but to the vast, untapped potential of the sea. Let the image of those tall wooden ships with their sails billowing against a grey, challenging sky linger in your mind. The merchants were the architects of a global future, yet they were driven by the same human desires that drive us today, the need to build something lasting, to provide for the next generation, and to gamble on the hope of a better life. The world was changing rapidly and irreversibly, just as the embers in our hearth are slowly transforming from solid wood into delicate, glowing ash. The change is inevitable, but here, in the quiet of the night, we have the luxury of observing it with clarity and calm. The fire now glows with a deep, persistent intensity, much like the intellectual fervour that began to grip England during the Tudor century. As the merchants brought back wealth, they also brought back ideas, the vibrant, challenging currents of the Renaissance that were sweeping across Europe. We are witnessing a fundamental shift in the human spirit, the transition from a mindset dictated solely by dogma to one defined by curiosity and the pursuit of individual potential. In the early years of the 1500s, education was the exclusive domain of the clergy and the highest nobility, tightly locked within the Latin walls of the church. But as the Tudor state expanded and the economy diversified, the demand for literacy grew. A merchant's son needed to calculate risk, a clerk needed to record complex maritime contracts, a lawyer needed to navigate the evolving statutes of a nation in flux. This necessity birthed the grammar schools, institutions that were not just about training the next generation of scholars, but about providing the foundational skills for a new professional class. This was a transformative moment for the English language itself. Influenced by the rediscovered classics of Greece and Rome, the Tudor intellect began to experiment with vernacular literature. Think of the excitement in the air when printing presses, now becoming more common in London, began to churn out books, not just in Latin, but in the English spoken in the streets. For the first time, political pamphlets, instructional manuals, and poetry were accessible to anyone with a few coins and the ability to read. Knowledge was no longer a static monument, it was a living, breathing river that anyone could drink from. However, this intellectual liberation brought with it a deep, underlying tension. As people began to read more, they began to question more. They questioned the role of the monarch in their lives, the structure of the church, and the traditional social hierarchy that had kept them in their place for centuries. The Renaissance mind was not just about the beauty of art or the mastery of rhetoric, it was a potent, often dangerous tool for social critique. The Tudor monarchs were brilliant at fostering this cultural growth, yet they were constantly walking a tightrope, trying to channel this new energy into service for the state, while preventing it from sparking open rebellion. Consider the interior lives of the people who navigated this time. Imagine a young clerk in London, sitting by the light of a small taper, reading a translated work of Cicero. In that moment, he is engaging in a dialogue with a mind from antiquity, applying ancient wisdom to the practical realities of 16th-century commerce. He is creating his own identity independent of the village or the parish he was born into. This was the birth of the individual, a person who could reflect on their own place in the cosmos, who could envision a life defined by their own merit rather than the circumstances of their birth. As you reflect on this, look at the fire before us. Just as the printing press spread sparks of thought across the nation, each spark from our hearth has a life of its own before it fades into the darkness. This is the beauty of history. It is a continuous, unfolding process where ideas act as catalysts for change. The Tudor period was a crucible, a time when the rigidity of the medieval world was broken open to make room for the complexity of the modern age. They were learning to think, to debate, and to envision a world that was constantly growing, expanding, and challenging their deepest assumptions. We are the inheritors of that curiosity, the descendants of that very specific human drive to understand the world, and in doing so to fundamentally change it. The firelight casts steady, sharp shadows against the wall, a reminder of the rigid structures that held the Tudor world together even as it underwent massive intellectual transformation. If the Renaissance brought the fire of new ideas, the Tudor administrative machine was the hearth that contained and directed that energy. We must look at the development of the state itself, a transition from a kingdom governed by the personal whims of powerful nobles to one governed by the cold, precise machinery of the statute. Under the Tudors, specifically through the reforms of figures like Thomas Cromwell, the English government underwent a profound professionalisation. No longer could a monarch rely solely on their household staff to manage the finances and legal affairs of a nation. They created the Privy Council and expanded the bureaucratic reach of the state into the very corners of the realm. This was a pivotal moment in history, the birth of the modern nation-state. Every local magistrate, every tax collector, and every clerk became a thread in a complex web of control that stretched from the throne in London down to the most remote parish in Cornwall. Yet this efficiency had a price. The rule of law became both a shield and a sword. On one hand, it provided a level of predictability and stability that allowed commerce to flourish and justice to be more consistently applied. On the other hand, the Tudor state became remarkably adept at utilizing these legal instruments to silence opposition. The courtroom, rather than the battlefield, became the primary arena where the fate of individuals was decided. The treason laws were refined and expanded to the point where an unintended comment or a private letter could lead to a catastrophic confrontation with the crown. Think of the psychological weight this placed on the individual. A person living in the mid-1500s existed in a state of constant subtle vigilance. You were encouraged to participate in the new economy, to be educated and to think for yourself, but only up to a point. The state was always watching, and the statutes were always evolving. There was a constant tension between the desire for personal advancement and the necessity of navigating the treacherous currents of royal favour and parliamentary decree. It was a time when one's social standing could be elevated by a well-placed word in court, or shattered by a perceived breach of loyalty to the sovereign. This dynamic created a unique kind of resilience in the English character. People learned the art of discretion. They developed the ability to operate within the system while harbouring their own private thoughts and loyalties. It was the birth of a culture that deeply valued public order while fiercely protecting private conscience. They understood that the law was the framework upon which society was built, and that to challenge that framework was to risk everything. Yet by operating within those constraints they managed to push the boundaries, gradually expanding the scope of what was permissible and what was possible. As you sit in the quiet of this night, consider the complexity of the world they lived in. They were not merely subjects of a crown. They were active participants in a rapidly evolving experiment in governance. They navigated a landscape where the rules were being rewritten in real time, where the stability of the nation was tied to the personal survival of the monarch, and where every citizen played a part, however small, in the unfolding drama of the state. The fire in our hearth is dying down, its intensity fading, just as the political passions of the Tudor age eventually gave way to the stability of the next era. But the foundations laid during those years, the reliance on the rule of law, the professionalization of the state, and the complex relationship between the individual and the government, remain the very pillars of the modern world we inhabit today. The fire has burned down to a collection of glowing, white-dusted embers, providing a soft, consistent warmth that fills the room with a sense of quiet closure. Let us turn our attention to the soil of England, for in the 16th century the transformation of the land itself was perhaps the most visceral shift of all. We are entering the era of the enclosure movement, a fundamental change in how the English people lived, worked and related to the landscape that had sustained them since the Middle Ages. For centuries, the English countryside had been defined by the open field system. Villagers held strips of land scattered across vast, unfenced commons. It was a communal, albeit subsistence-level way of life, where the village gathered the harvest together and grazed their livestock on shared pastures. But as the wool trade boomed and the demand for cloth grew exponentially in the markets of Europe, the logic of the economy began to supersede the logic of tradition. Landlords realized that more profit could be made by fencing off these commons, enclosing them to create large private pastures for sheep. The impact was swift and transformative. Imagine the village elder watching as the ancient hedgerows were torn down and replaced with stone walls or deep ditches marking the boundaries of private property. For the small-scale farmer, this was a disaster. The loss of access to the commons meant they could no longer keep a cow or gather firewood. They were pushed off the land that their families had worked for generations. This wasn't just a change in property law, it was the breaking of a social contract that had held communities together for nearly a millennium. This enclosure process created a significant demographic shift. As families were displaced from their ancestral plots, they began to drift toward the growing towns and cities, creating a new, mobile labor force. These people became the backbone of the burgeoning urban industries, but they paid a heavy price in the form of displacement and the loss of their traditional way of life. It was a brutal evolution, yet it was precisely this forced migration that fueled the economic engine of the Tudor state, providing the manpower for the textile workshops and the rising maritime trade. Think of the emotional weight of this transition. For a farmer, the land was not just an asset, it was an extension of his identity. To see the landscape being carved up by fences was to see his world narrowing, his connection to the seasons and the soil becoming more precarious. This period of history marks the painful transition from a world of collective survival to a world of individual competition. It was the birth of the haves and the have-nots in a modern sense, a social stratification that would define British history for centuries to come. As you sit in the stillness of the night, consider the resilience of those who lived through this epochal change. They had to reinvent themselves, to learn new trades, and to adapt to the rhythm of a market-driven world. They were the ones who paved the way for the industrial age that would follow. Just as our fire slowly dies into embers, the old communal ways of the English village were fading, making way for a new, more efficient yet undeniably harsher future. We look back at this not with judgment, but with a recognition of the sheer human cost of progress. It is a reminder that the world we live in today, with all its structured ownership and economic complexity, was forged in the heat of a transformation that asked everything of the people who lived through it. We are resting now in a world shaped by these distant, echoing shifts, finding our own peace in the quiet moments that the past has left behind for us. The fire has faded to a soft, pulsating amber, casting a dim light that dances on the walls, much like the shadows of uncertainty that surrounded the health and healing of the Tudor people. As we sit in the quiet of this late hour, let us look into the apothecary's shop of the 16th century, a place where the air was thick with the scent of dried herbs, pungent minerals, and the faint metallic tang of an alchemist's furnace. This was a world on the threshold, caught between the ancient whispered wisdom of the folk healer and the burgeoning cold curiosity of the scientific observer. To the people of the Tudor era, the body was a delicate microcosm of the cosmos, governed by the same forces that moved the stars and the tides. They believed that health was a state of balance, a precarious equilibrium of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. When sickness struck, it was seen as a disruption of this divine order. Imagine a physician, his face obscured by the flickering light, carefully examining a glass vessel of urine, seeking to read the hidden history of the patient's ailments in its colour and consistency. It was a practice rooted in tradition, yet there was a desperate human intensity behind it, a profound desire to understand and master the forces of mortality. In the back rooms of these shops, away from the prying eyes of the church or the scrutiny of the universities, the alchemists worked their craft. They were not merely looking for ways to turn lead into gold, they were searching for the elixir of life, a substance that could conquer the fragility of the human form. Think of the glass stills bubbling over charcoal fires, the crushed pearls, the powdered roots of exotic plants, and the distillations of metals. To us these may seem like the desperate superstitions of a bygone age, but to the Tudor mind, this was the cutting edge of research. They were pioneers in a landscape of total darkness, guided only by the flicker of their own hope. This obsession with health and longevity was a direct reaction to the constant, looming presence of death. In an age of recurring plague, high infant mortality, and the lack of sanitation, life was fragile, fleeting, and precious. Every herbal remedy, every ritualized prayer, and every alchemical experiment was a defensive wall against the inevitability of the end. It was this struggle that drove the evolution of early modern medicine. They began to document their results, to observe the specific reactions of the body, and to challenge the ancient texts of Galen and Hippocrates that had dominated the medical world for over 1,000 years. As you lie here in the safety of your own space, consider the sheer determination of those who sought to push back against the boundaries of life and death. They were the ones who dared to ask why and how, even when the answers were hidden behind a veil of mystery. They laid the groundwork for our modern understanding of pharmacology and physiology, not through certainty but through a restless, insatiable curiosity. Feel the stillness of your own body now, the slow, steady rise and fall of your chest, the quiet rhythm of your heart. You are a miracle of biology, a complex system that would have baffled the most learned physician of the Tudor court. Let go of the need to control the future, to fix every ailment, or to master every uncertainty. The alchemists were looking for the secret of life in the bottom of a crucible, but they missed the simplest truth. The greatest healing occurs in the state of total undisturbed rest. Allow yourself to be still. Allow yourself to be mended by the simple passage of time. The night is quiet, the fire is low, and you are drifting into a state of profound natural recovery. Everything is silent, everything is ready, you are safe. The fire in our hearth has reduced to a soft, glowing bed of embers, casting a gentle and steady light that feels like the warm, focused glow of a scholar's lamp. In the quiet of this night, imagine a small wood-panelled room tucked away in a quiet corner of a manor house, a private library, the sanctuary of a Tudor intellectual. The air here smells of aged parchment, calfskin bindings, and the faint, dusty scent of time itself. To own books in the 16th century was to hold a piece of the world's wisdom in one's hands. Each volume was a labour of devotion, pages made of vellum, painstakingly stitched together and inscribed with ink that had been mixed by hand. Think of the scholar sitting at a heavy oak desk, a single taper burning nearby. As he reads, he makes notations in the margins, engaging in a silent, centuries-long conversation with the authors of antiquity. He is not just absorbing information, he is refining his own understanding, testing arguments, and documenting the growth of his own mind. This was an era where the act of writing was a revolutionary contribution to the survival of thought. The printing press was making books more accessible, but the handwritten manuscript remained the vessel for personal, reflective, and often dangerous ideas. In these libraries, the politics of the day were debated in the margins of classical texts. Philosophers, poets, and political thinkers hid their radical theories within the structures of familiar stories and allegories, creating a secret language of intellect that thrived beneath the surface of royal surveillance. There is a profound, quiet dignity in this pursuit. The scholar knows that his time is finite, yet he works under the belief that his thoughts, his reflections on justice, nature, or the human condition might survive long after he is gone. It is an act of defiance against the silence of death. By preserving knowledge, by categorizing the natural world, and by questioning the laws of man, they were building the intellectual architecture of the future. They knew that a well-written word had the power to outlast a fortress of stone. As you sit in the stillness tonight, consider the weight of this legacy, the very history we have explored over these many nights. The merchants, the farmers, the healers, and the scholars exists because someone, somewhere, took the time to write it down. They captured the fleeting moments of their lives so that the heartbeat of their era would not be lost to the void of time. They left a trail of breadcrumbs for us to follow, allowing us to sit here centuries later and feel the warmth of their humanity. You too are an author of your own history. Every day, through your actions, your thoughts, and your quiet reflections, you are contributing to the unfolding narrative of the world. But for tonight, the writing is finished. The books are closed, the ink is dry. You have reached the end of the day's chapter, and there is no more that needs to be said. Allow your mind to become like those quiet, leather-bound volumes resting on the shelves, settled, secure, and holding within them the calm, silent wisdom of all that you have lived. The night is deep, the room is still, and you are drifting into the most restful part of the story, the place where thoughts dissolve into dreams. You are at peace, everything is finished, rest now. The embers have faded to a soft, pulsing warmth, leaving the room in a state of tranquil velvet shadow. Let us now shift our perspective from the quiet libraries to the very edge of the map, where the Tudor world met the vast, uncharted blue of the Atlantic. Imagine standing on a wind-swept cliffside in Cornwall, the salt spray misting your skin, gazing out at the horizon where the sea meets the sky in a seamless line of mystery. For the mariners of the 16th century, this horizon was not merely a physical limit, it was a psychological frontier. They set out in wooden ships, guided by the movement of the stars and the intuition of the tides, venturing into a reality that defied their current knowledge. Every map they carried was incomplete, marked with terra incognita, land unknown. There was a profound courage required to step off the edge of the known world, to leave behind the safety of the harbour and the certainty of the shore for the sake of discovery. This was the era of the great voyages, a time when the globe began to unfold its true scale. The political implications were immense, the scramble for trade routes, the competition between empires, and the relentless expansion of global influence. But if we look past the charts of bullion and spice, we find a more personal story. It is the story of the individual confronting the sublime, the sheer, overwhelming scale of an ocean that did not care for the titles of kings or the decrees of parliaments. Out there, in the silence of the middle of the sea, human ambition felt both incredibly powerful and beautifully insignificant. Think of the sailor on a moonlit night, his ship a small rhythmic cradle on the vast expanse of the dark water. He is thousands of miles from the comfort of his hearth, surrounded by nothing but the elements. In such moments, the veneer of the social world falls away. He is left with nothing but his own breath, his own heartbeat, and the ancient, unchanging rhythm of the tides. This experience changed the Tudor consciousness. It fostered a resilience, a pragmatic adaptability, and a deep, intuitive respect for the unpredictability of life. As you lie here, let that vast, calm horizon become the backdrop for your own rest. You are not adrift in an uncertain world. You are anchored in the safety of your own sanctuary. The fears and the unknowns that may have clouded your mind during the day are like those distant, uncharted waters. They lose their power when you stop trying to force them into a map. You are safe. You are grounded. The vastness outside your window is not something to conquer. It is a peaceful, infinite expanse that surrounds you, cradling you in its silence. Let your awareness expand until it touches that same peaceful horizon. The world is quiet. The journey of the day has reached a calm, natural harbour. You have seen enough, you have done enough, and now you're invited to let go of the map entirely. There is no destination you need to reach tonight, no new land to discover. There is only the deep, welcoming stillness of the present. Feel yourself drifting into that silence, carried by the gentle, steady motion of your own life, moving peacefully toward the deepest, most restorative sleep of all. Everything is calm, everything is drifting, you are home. The fire has softened into a gentle, glowing pulse, and the house is completely still. In this deep silence, let us listen not to the roar of the ocean, but to the intricate, layered symphony of a Tudor city at the height of its day. Imagine the cobblestone streets of London or Bristol, where the air is thick with the sounds of a society in motion. It is a cacophony, yes, but one that possesses a rhythmic, human grace all its own. Listen to the steady, rhythmic clink, clink, clink of the blacksmith's hammer against the anvil. It is the heartbeat of the town, a sound that has persisted for centuries, marking the transformation of raw iron into the tools that build houses, plough fields, and forge locks for doors. Every strike is deliberate, a testament to the patient craftsmanship that defined the era. Alongside it, you hear the distant, melodic calls of the street hawkers, men and women selling everything from fresh fish and seasonal greens to ribbons and handcrafted trinkets. Their voices rise and fall, a communal melody that fills the gaps between the buildings. But it is not just the labour that resonates. It is the human connection built through these sounds. The rattle of a wooden cart on uneven stone, the distant tolling of a church bell marking the hour, the soft murmur of neighbours exchanging news as they pass in the shadow of an overhanging timber frame. These are the threads that bind the community together. In a time before mass media, the street was the town square, the newsroom, and the meeting place. To walk these streets was to be constantly immersed in the collective experience of living. There was a profound sense of togetherness in these sounds. Even in the middle of a crowd, a person was never truly alone. They were part of a larger, living organism. The sounds of the city were a reassurance that the world was functioning, that the community was thriving, and that life was continuing its forward march. It was a sensory environment that demanded presence. You couldn't be lost in your own thoughts because the world around you was constantly inviting you to participate, to listen, and to respond. As you lie here in the profound quiet of your own room, contrast that bustling soundscape with the stillness you feel now. The silence you are experiencing is a gift, a rare and precious luxury that the people of the 16th century knew only at the very end of their day. They lived their lives in the centre of that symphony, and their rest was a total departure from the noise. You're holding that same peace now. You have been a witness to the energy of the world, but now you are free to step back. Let the memory of those distant city sounds, the hammer, the bell, the cart, drift further and further away, becoming nothing more than a faint, rhythmic hum in the back of your mind. They are fading into the darkness, leaving you in a space of absolute, restorative silence. You don't need to be part of the bustle tonight. You don't need to listen to anything but the soft, slow rhythm of your own breathing. The city sleeps, the workers have set down their tools, and you too are ready to lay down the weight of your day. Everything is quiet, everything is still. You are drifting into a sleep that is deep, heavy, and completely uninterrupted. The firelight is now a soft amber ember, casting long and gentle shadows across the room. As we linger in the quiet of this late hour, let your mind carry you into the great hall of a Tudor manor house. Imagine a night where the feast is over, the heavy silver has been cleared, and the hall has been transformed into a space of hushed candlelit reflection. This was the moment when the true essence of the banquet was revealed, not in the extravagance of the food, but in the lingering warm intimacy of the atmosphere. The long oak tables, polished by generations of use, still hold the faint, sweet scent of roasted spices and wood smoke. Hundreds of beeswax candles placed in iron sconces along the walls cast a glow so soft it seems to blur the edges of the room, turning the heavy stone architecture into something ethereal and inviting. In the 16th century, these banquets were more than just meals, they were the theatre of social harmony. They were the moments where politics was smoothed over by hospitality, and where the hierarchy of the court was softened by the shared experience of music, laughter, and light. Think of the patience required to prepare such a space. The stewards, the cooks, and the attendants moved with a practised, almost silent efficiency. There was an art to the placement of every dish, the arrangement of every light, the timing of every song. It was a commitment to the ceremony of living. They understood that to dine together was to create a common bond, a temporary suspension of conflict, and an acknowledgement of their shared humanity. It was an environment that demanded a certain grace of behaviour, a slowing down of the pace, a conscious attention to one's neighbour, and a deep appreciation for the moment. As the night deepened, the hall became a sanctuary. The outside world, with its pressures, duties, and vast uncertainties, was locked away behind the heavy timber doors. Inside, the focus was entirely on the present, on the warmth of the hearth, the soft conversation, and the comforting sense of being part of something enduring. It was a space that offered a profound, unspoken sense of security. You were cared for, you were part of a structure that was solid and reliable. As you sit in your own room tonight, draw upon this image of the banquet hall. Let the memory of that soft candlelit warmth wrap around you like a heavy velvet cloak. You are not alone, you are part of a long, unbroken lineage of people who have found comfort in the simple, ritualized peace of the end of the day. You don't need to perform, you don't need to host, and you don't need to hold the room together. You are simply a guest in the sanctuary of your own home, invited to rest, to be silent, and to let the day dissolve. The candles in our imaginary hall are burning low, their flames flickering in the cool night air. The music has faded into a quiet, rhythmic hum that lulls the mind into a state of deep, receptive calm. Everything is settled. The hall is still, the guests have departed into the shadows of the night, and you are left in a space of perfect, undivided quiet. You are drifting into a state where there is only rest, only the gentle, slow rhythm of your own soul finding its way home to sleep. Everything is soft, everything is calm, everything is fine. The fire has dwindled, leaving only a soft, radiant glow that mirrors the gentle, rhythmic motion of a weaver's loom. Let us step into the quiet, sun-dusted workspace of a 16th-century weaver. In an age before the thunder of industrial machinery, the creation of cloth was a deeply personal, meditative process. It was a craft that demanded total presence, a dialogue between the hands, the thread, and the mind. Imagine the room. It is small, filled with the clean, earthy scent of raw wool. The weaver sits before a large wooden frame, a complex assembly of beams, heddles, and shuttles. The process is a dance of constant repetition. The shuttle flies from left to right, then back again, with a soft, sliding sound that is as steady and predictable as a heartbeat. Swish, thud, swish, thud. Each pass of the shuttle locks a thread into place, building a fabric that is strong, durable, and crafted to last for decades, perhaps even generations. There was a profound dignity in this work. For the weaver, the quality of the cloth was a reflection of their own character. They were not just producing a commodity, they were participating in the slow, meticulous art of creation. This was a world that valued the long view. They knew that quality could not be rushed, and that the beauty of the finished product was entirely dependent on the care taken in every single row. It was a philosophy of existence that taught the value of patience, of trusting that if you keep moving, if you keep working with intent, a greater pattern will inevitably emerge. Think of the symbolism of the loom. The warp threads represent the fixed structures of life, the traditions, the laws, the seasons, the inevitable truths we are all born into. The weft, the thread moving across, represents our own journey, our choices, and the unique path we carve through the circumstances of our lives. When these two interact, they create the tapestry of our existence. The weaver understood this connection intuitively. They knew that their life was a thread in a larger design, and there was peace to be found in simply doing their part well, day after day. As you sit in the stillness tonight, imagine that rhythmic swish-thud sounding in the back of your mind. It is a grounding, stabilizing sound. It is a reminder that you too are part of a larger design. The stresses and anxieties that pull at you during the day are like tangled threads. They are temporary, and they can be smoothed out with time and patience. You don't need to finish the whole tapestry tonight. You only need to let go, to relax your hands, and to allow the rhythm of your own breathing to take over. The weaver has finished their work for the day. The loom stands silent in the corner, the fabric waiting for tomorrow's morning light. You are in that same state of completion. Everything you have done today, everything you have felt and thought has been part of your unique pattern. It is enough. The loom is still, the threads are secure. You are drifting into a deep velvety silence where the patterns of the day fade away, leaving only the soft, endless space of rest. Everything is calm, everything is quiet. You are ready for sleep. The fire has softened into a thin, golden ribbon of light that barely touches the floorboards, a quiet end to a long, industrious day. In the stillness of this hour, let us walk through the weathered stone archways of an old monastic cloister. Even after the great dissolutions, these spaces retained an aura of profound, almost heavy silence, a silence that was designed to separate the soul from the distractions of the material world. Imagine walking along the covered walkway, your footsteps echoing gently against the cool, ancient flagstones. On one side, the stone arches open into a central garden, a square of grass, a few hardy shrubs, and perhaps the stone remnants of a fountain that once hummed with the sound of trickling water. In the Tudor world, this space was not merely a decorative feature, it was a physical manifestation of an inward state. It was a place where time seemed to fold in on itself, where the frantic pace of the markets and the political intrigue of the court were replaced by the deliberate, slow rhythm of observation. The philosophy behind the cloister was simple yet radical. To understand oneself, one must be willing to step out of the crowd. They understood that the mind, like the water in a disturbed pond, needs stillness to become clear again. In the heat of the day, our thoughts are tossed by 1,000 different demands and impressions, but here, within these walls, those ripples are allowed to die away. The air itself feels different, cool, still, and heavy with the weight of centuries of contemplation. It is an air that invites you to breathe deeper, to release the tension in your shoulders, and to let go of the need to be anything other than what you are in this exact moment. Think of the monks and scholars who paced these same walkways. They didn't see silence as an emptiness, they saw it as a presence, a space that could be filled with wisdom, perspective, and a renewed sense of purpose. They practiced the art of the interior life, a sanctuary that they carried with them even when they had to re-enter the bustling, chaotic streets of the village. It was a practice of grounding, of keeping one's centre intact amidst the relentless pressure of a changing society. As you sit in the safety of your own room tonight, realize that you are in your own cloister. The walls of your home are the stone arches. The darkness of the night is the soft shielding cover of the walkway. You don't need to travel to a monastery to find this kind of peace. It is already here, waiting for you in the gaps between your thoughts. The demands of your life, the plans for tomorrow, the lingering echoes of the day. They are all distractions that you can simply choose to leave outside the gate. Let the silence of the cloister wash over you. Feel how the room seems to grow more spacious as you let go of your thoughts. You are entering a space where nothing is expected of you, where you don't have to produce, to solve, or to sustain anything. You are simply present, a small peaceful part of the vast quiet design of the universe. The fire is almost gone. The world is asleep, and you are drifting further and further into the cool, dark, and utterly restorative depths of your own inner peace. Everything is still, everything is silent. You are resting now completely and perfectly. The fire has faded to a mere dusting of glowing ash, much like the faint distant light of the stars that once guided the Tudor mariners across the dark, undulating surface of the Atlantic. As we settle into the deepest part of the night, let your mind drift to the deck of a 16th-century carrack, far from the sight of land, under a sky so vast and piercingly clear that it feels as if the universe is holding its breath. In the 16th century, the stars were not just points of light, they were the essential, unwavering anchors of human survival. To navigate the open sea was to engage in a silent mathematical dialogue with the cosmos. The mariner, clutching a brass astrolabe or a cross-staff, would peer through the shadows of the night to capture the angle of the North Star above the horizon. It was a moment of profound vulnerability and absolute trust. With nothing but the silent movement of the heavens to guide them, these explorers were attempting to map the very limits of the known world, driven by a blend of raw courage and profound humility. Think of what this meant for the human perspective. For centuries, the world had been defined by the local parish, the village boundary, and the king's reach. Now, as they gazed at the constellations that remained the same, regardless of which coast they approached, they began to realize the sheer humbling scale of the earth. They were small, floating on a tiny wooden shell in the midst of an infinite dark, yet they possessed the audacity to calculate their path across the vastness. It was a defining moment for the modern mind, the birth of a realization that humanity was not just a spectator in the cosmos, but an active participant in understanding its laws. This navigational obsession was also deeply philosophical. It was a search for order in a world that felt increasingly chaotic. As the political and religious foundations of the Tudor age shifted, as the Reformation redrew the maps of belief, and the economy reordered the structure of society, people looked to the heavens for a sense of permanence. They believed that if they could master the movement of the stars, they could perhaps find the blueprint for their own success, their own safety, and their own future. It was a reflection of the eternal human desire to find a predictable path through the unpredictable currents of life. As you lie here in the dark, let the image of that star-filled sky become your own. The darkness outside your window is not a void. It is the same deep, infinite space that the mariners gazed upon 5 centuries ago. You don't need to navigate anything tonight. You don't need to measure your progress, to calculate your risks, or to fear being lost. You are exactly where you need to be. You have reached the final waypoint of your day, and the harbour of sleep is directly before you. Feel the weight of your own body anchoring you to the earth, while your mind, like the eyes of the mariner, is free to drift upward into the vast calm silence of the night. Let go of your orientation, let go of the need to know where you are or where you are going. There is no destination left to reach. The sky is holding you, the night is cradling you, and you are drifting into a state of total weightless rest. The stars are constant, the night is deep, and everything is perfectly, beautifully still. You are sleeping now, everything is finished. Rest. The fire has become a bed of fine silver-grey ash, a silent testament to the warmth that once filled the room. As the last embers dim, let us walk into a Tudor herb garden at the edge of twilight. This is not the grand, formal landscape of the nobility, but the practical, cherished garden of a common household. Here, the air is not quiet. It is filled with the subtle green language of rosemary, sage, hyssop, and lavender, a living apothecary that whispered of healing and restoration. In the 16th century, the garden was a vital extension of the home. Every plant had a purpose, every leaf a story. The Tudor person understood that their health was intimately woven into the cycles of the seasons. When they planted their seeds in the spring, they were not just preparing for a harvest, they were preparing for the months of cold, for the times of sickness, and for the need to maintain balance in a world that could be physically harsh. They walked these paths with a profound sense of stewardship, tending to the soil with the same care they used to tend to their own hearts. Think of the patience in this work to distill an oil, to dry a bundle of lavender, to crush a root into a soothing salve. These were not industrial tasks, they were ritualized acts of care. There was a belief that the essence of the plant, its virtue, could be transferred to the human body to restore it to harmony. It was a philosophy that saw no wall between the human and the natural world. They believed they were part of the same pulse, and that the earth in its generosity provided the exact remedy for whatever ailed them. This perspective gave them a unique kind of resilience. They lived with the seasons, accepting the growth and the dormancy, the bloom and the decay. They didn't fight the natural order, they learned to move with it. In their quiet hours, they found solace in the simple sight of a garden under the moonlight, a place where life was continuous, where things could be healed, and where beauty was a natural byproduct of utility. As you sit in your own sanctuary tonight, feel that same ancient connection to the earth. You are surrounded by the silence of the night, but even in the dark there is life and order. The stress of your day is merely a temporary ailment, one that can be eased by the simple restorative power of stillness. You don't need to force yourself to be calm, you just need to allow yourself to be quiet. Just as the garden rests under the stars, preparing for the life of tomorrow, you are preparing for the recovery of your own spirit. The garden path is ending now. The scents have faded into the cool, damp night air. The work is done. The plants are still. There is nothing left to tend to, nothing left to worry about. You are drifting into a space of complete natural ease, where your heartbeat slows to match the stillness of the earth, and your mind settles into the deep, dark soil of rest. Everything is slow, everything is soft. You are perfectly, naturally at peace. Sleep. The fire has fully surrendered to the quiet, leaving behind only the faintest warmth that lingers in the cooling air of the room. Let us turn our attention to the structure that defined the Tudor life, the timber-framed house. These buildings, with their dark, exposed beams of seasoned oak and walls filled with wattle and daub, were more than just shelters. They were expressions of an age that was learning to value the sanctity of the private sphere, a refuge built by hand, designed to hold the warmth of a family against the unpredictable winds of the English landscape. Imagine the craftsmanship that went into these homes. The carpenter, following the lines laid out by his ancestors, would carve joints that locked together with a precision that defied the shifting of the earth. These houses were living things. They groaned as the wood expanded in the heat and contracted in the frost. To live in such a space was to live in constant dialogue with nature. You knew the direction of the wind by the way the rafters settled. You knew the coming of the storm by the way the house held its breath in the stillness before the rain. These homes were constructed to be defensive, yes, but also to be intimate. The windows were small, designed to retain the precious heat of the fire, creating deep-set alcoves where a person could sit, hidden from the gaze of the street, and contemplate the world through a glass pane. Inside, the spaces were segmented, with private chambers becoming more common as the desire for individual retreat grew. This was an architectural shift toward the modern, a move toward the understanding that a home should not just be a place of labor or public gathering, but a sanctuary for the mind. Think of the psychological effect of this space. When a person stepped over the threshold, they were leaving the identity of their social status, the merchant, the clerk, the laborer, outside the door. In the warm, dimly lit interior, they were simply themselves. The thickness of the walls provided a physical barrier that allowed for the cultivation of an inner life. It was here, in the quiet of the hearth, that the dramas of the family were played out, where children were taught, where stories were shared, and where the values of the next generation were forged in the shadow of the beams. As you sit in your own space tonight, acknowledge the architecture of your own comfort. You are housed in a structure that exists to hold you, to protect you from the vast, dark emptiness of the night. Feel the enclosure of your room, the walls that stand between you and the rest of the world. They are not barriers, they are guardians. They allow you the luxury of being completely vulnerable, of setting down your defenses, and of entering the realm of the subconscious without hesitation. You have reached the furthest point of our journey through the Tudor day, and you have arrived at the most essential truth, the necessity of the refuge. You are safe. The world outside continues its turn, its history, and its noise, but here, in the quiet of this room, time has no claim on you. You are held by the stillness, supported by the quiet, and drifting into a state of total, undisturbed rest. The house is silent, you are settled, everything is complete, sleep. The fire has faded to a soft, pulsating amber, but the room is not yet ready for the silence of finality. Instead, let us imagine a sound that often drifted through the halls of a Tudor manor when the world was otherwise still, the delicate crystalline vibration of a lute. In the 16th century, music was not merely entertainment, it was a way of structuring the chaos of life, a way of imposing a divine order upon the rushing thoughts of the day. Imagine the player sitting by an open window, the night air cool and carrying the scent of dew and damp earth. Their fingers move with a slow, deliberate grace over the strings, pulling forth a melody that is both melancholy and profoundly reassuring. This was music designed for the individual soul, not for the grandeur of the court, but for the quiet, intimate communion of a person with their own thoughts. Each note, resonant and clear, hangs in the air for a heartbeat before dissolving, reminding the listener of the fleeting yet precious nature of a single moment. To listen to such music was to practice the art of being. It was an invitation to stop analysing the complexities of the political state, the demands of the merchant trade, or the anxieties of the future. The music demanded nothing of the listener but their presence. It was a bridge between the physical reality of the wood, the wire, and the flesh, and the intangible world of emotion. When the last vibration of a chord faded into the dark, it left behind a profound sense of clarity, a feeling that for a brief time everything in the world was perfectly aligned. Think of the patience required to play this music. It is not a rush toward a crescendo, but a gentle exploration of harmony. It mimics the rhythm of a calm mind. In an age of sudden shifts and dramatic upheavals, this nightly ritual of music was a way to ground oneself. It was a reminder that no matter how much the world changed, there was a fundamental beauty that remained constant, waiting to be heard by anyone who took the time to listen. As you sit in the stillness tonight, imagine that faint, lingering sound of a lute string plucked in the distance. Let it be the soundtrack to your transition into deep rest. You don't need to chase the melody. You only need to let it wash over you. The music is not trying to tell you a story, it is simply inviting you to breathe. The complex harmonies of your day, the questions, the duties, the unfinished business, are resolving into a single peaceful chord of silence. You are the listener in this quiet hall, and the night is playing a melody just for you. There is no urgency in the strings, no rush to the end. The music is unfolding at its own pace, a slow, gentle progression that guides you deeper into the dark velvet folds of the night. Feel your muscles softening, your thoughts lengthening, and your spirit settling into the resonance of the room. You are safe, you are surrounded by beauty. You are drifting on the quietest notes of the night, moving effortlessly toward a state of profound musical grace. Everything is harmonious, everything is still rest. The last echoes of the lute have dissolved into the stillness, leaving the room in a state of tranquil suspension. Let us move, in our mind's eye, through a long darkened gallery in a Tudor manor. Along the walls, a series of portraits hang in the dim, flickering light. These are not merely paintings, they are attempts to capture the spark of a human life, preserved in layers of oil and pigment, intended to defy the passage of the years. Look closely at the faces captured on the canvas. The artist has meticulously detailed the ruff of a collar, the texture of a velvet doublet, the glint of a ring, but it is the eyes that draw you in. They are painted with a deliberate, haunting intensity, as if the subjects knew that these images would be their only legacy. In the 16th century, a portrait was a statement of existence, a declaration that I was here, I felt, I lived, and I matter. There is a shared vulnerability in these gazes, a silent appeal to the viewer to recognize their humanity across the vast chasm of centuries. Consider the atmosphere of this gallery at night. The portraits seem to emerge from the darkness, their features softened by shadow. They are a congregation of souls, frozen in a state of quiet contemplation. They aren't posing, they are waiting. They are the witnesses to a history that we are still trying to understand. To walk among them is to feel the weight of time, not as a crushing force, but as a long, continuous chain of human experience. You see the pride, the weariness, the curiosity, and the hope that defined their era, and you realize how remarkably similar they are to the emotions that color your own life. This gallery is a reminder that we too are constantly painting our own portraits, not with oil and wood, but with our choices, our words, and the imprint we leave on the lives of others. The Tudor figures did not know the world we inhabit, yet they built the foundations of our thoughts, our laws, and our culture. We are their descendants in spirit, walking the same path of discovery, wrestling with the same questions of purpose and peace. As you lie here in the safety of your room, imagine these portraits watching over you, not with judgment, but with the quiet companionship of those who have already travelled the path you are on. They have faced the storms, they have known the quiet hours, and they have found their rest. The gallery is dark, the lights have been extinguished, and the subjects are sleeping, just as you are now. The history they lived has folded into the history you are living, creating a seamless, unbroken narrative of humanity. You have no more to prove, no more to perform. The portrait of your own day is complete, and it is a beautiful, complex masterpiece of effort and existence. Let the images of the past recede into the gentle darkness. The hall is silent, the faces are still. You are drifting into a place of deep, undisturbed slumber, wrapped in the quiet legacy of all those who came before. Everything is calm, everything is secure. Sleep now, sleep. The gallery of portraits has faded into the soft, velvet darkness, and now all that remains is the sound of time itself. In the quiet of a Tudor study, an hourglass sits upon a heavy desk. The sand is fine, pale, and persistent. With a whisper that is almost imperceptible, it slides through the narrow neck of the glass, grain by grain, marking the passage of the 16th century not with the harsh ticking of modern machinery, but with the fluid, rhythmic descent of earth itself. To the Tudor mind, time was not a resource to be managed or a commodity to be sold. It was a seasonal, cyclical phenomenon. It was the movement of the sun across the stone floor, the changing length of the shadows in the garden, and the slow, steady progress of the sand. They lived in harmony with this measured heartbeat. They knew that there was a time for planting, a time for harvest, and a time for the absolute stillness of winter. There was a profound, liberating peace in accepting that some things were simply beyond their control, that the sands would fall regardless of their ambition, their worry, or their frantic attempts to stay ahead of the clock. Think of the person who watched this glass. They were not watching to see how much time they had left. They were watching the grace of the process. Each grain of sand was a moment of life, a brief flicker of consciousness that contributed to the whole. By focusing on the flow rather than the destination, they found a way to be present in the very core of their existence. It was a meditative practice, a way of grounding the spirit in the reality of the now. In our world, we are often obsessed with the ticking of the clock, the pressure of deadlines, and the fear that time is slipping through our fingers. But tonight, in this sanctuary of history, let us adopt the wisdom of the hourglass. Let the sand fall. There is no need to catch it, no need to turn the glass over, and no need to rush the descent. The time that has passed today has served its purpose, and the time that is yet to come is entirely secure in its own rhythm. As you lie here, feel your own heartbeat matching that gentle, steady rhythm of the falling sand. You are not losing time. You are settling into it. The rush of the day has been smoothed away by the simple, constant passage of the night. Every breath you take is a grain of peace settling into the base of your consciousness, building a foundation of deep, restorative rest. You are completely safe within the cycle of the night. The glass is half full, then a quarter, then nearly silent. The world outside is slowing down, catching up to the stillness you have already found. There is nothing left to measure, there is nothing left to count. You have arrived at the quietest point of the flow, where time itself seems to hold its breath. Let go of the clock, let go of the sand, drift into the vast, timeless space that exists between the moments. You are held, you are quiet, and you are ready to sleep. Everything is soft, everything is still rest. The room is steeped in the deep, indigo silence of the small hours, and the world outside feels like a distant, forgotten memory. In this stillness, let us contemplate the act of writing a letter, a cornerstone of communication in the Tudor world. Imagine a small chamber, dimly lit by a single candle, where a person sits with a quill in hand, the nib scratching softly against the parchment. This was not a quick exchange of information, it was a deliberate, ceremonial act of connection. In an age when a letter might take weeks, or even months to reach its destination, the words had to carry the full weight of the sender's heart. There was no room for haste. Every sentence was composed with intention, every sentiment measured, and every line imbued with the hope that the paper would survive the journey through rain, wind, and the uncertainties of the road. It was an act of faith, a belief that despite the vast distances and the passage of time, the words would eventually reach the eyes for which they were intended. Think of the patience required to wait for a reply. When a person sealed their letter with a drip of hot wax, pressing their signet ring into the molten surface, they were committing their trust to the hands of messengers and the mercy of fate. This period of waiting fostered a unique kind of discipline. It taught people how to hold on to their thoughts, how to nurture their affections, and how to remain connected to their loved ones even in their absence. It was a practice of keeping the spirit present when the body was far away. The letters themselves were often beautiful objects, the ink slightly raised on the page, the margin notes reflecting a spontaneous thought, the careful folding designed to protect the message within. They were tangible reminders that someone had taken the time to reach across the distance, to bridge the gap between two lives with nothing but ink and a steady hand. In the quiet of a Tudor home, the arrival of a letter was an event of profound significance, a temporary dissolution of loneliness, and a warm reaffirmation of one's place in the lives of others. As you sit in the safety of your own space tonight, consider your own capacity to connect. You are held in a web of relationships, of memories, and of shared experiences that transcend the walls of this room. You don't need to send a letter. You don't need to wait for a reply, and you don't need to bridge any physical distance. You are already at the heart of everything that matters. The people who love you, the memories that sustain you, and the sense of belonging you feel, they are all gathered here with you in the quiet. Let go of the need to reach out, to explain, or to be understood. You have communicated enough for today. The ink is dry, the seal is pressed, and the message has been sent into the stillness. You are resting in the warm knowledge that you are seen, you are held, and you are cherished. The night is a vessel of peace, carrying you deeper into the quiet, dark harbour of sleep. There is nothing left to write, nothing left to wait for. You are safe, you are home. Rest, now sleep. The last embers of the fire have quietly surrendered, leaving the room bathed in the deep indigo silence of the night. In this stillness, let your mind wander into the heart of a Tudor monastic garden. Here, behind the thick, weathered stone walls, the noise of the outside world simply ceases to exist. It is a space defined by the deliberate harmony of earth and architecture, a perfect square of manicured grass, surrounded by covered walkways where the shadow and light play a slow, eternal game upon the flagstones. In the 16th century, these gardens were far more than mere spaces for cultivation. They were physical embodiments of a tranquil mind. Rows of aromatic herbs, rosemary, sage, and hyssop, were planted with a geometric precision that mirrored the orderly contemplative lives of those who tended them. When the breeze moves through this space, it carries the earthy, soothing scent of damp soil and sun-warmed leaves, a fragrance that acts as a gentle anchor, grounding the spirit and softening the sharp edges of the day's concerns. Imagine sitting on a low stone bench near the central fountain, where a trickle of water marks the passage of time with soft rhythmic pulses. There is no urgency here. The plants do not rush to bloom, nor does the sun hasten its journey across the sky. Everything exists in a state of absolute acceptance. For those who sought refuge within these walls, the act of weeding, watering, and watching was a form of prayer, a way to step out of the frantic currents of history and into the deep, slow pulse of nature. This cloister is a sanctuary for your own thoughts. Within these stone boundaries you are protected from the demands of the world, the complexities of your day, the lingering questions and the weight of your responsibilities. They cannot enter here. They are left outside the gate. In this garden you are allowed to be entirely present, to breathe in the cool green stillness, and to find the place within yourself where nothing is needed, nothing is lacking, and everything is perfectly at peace. As you lie here, allow the imagery of the cloister to envelop you. The stone walls are your safety, the soft grass is your comfort, and the gentle sound of the fountain is the steady heartbeat of your own relaxation. Feel your thoughts becoming as quiet as the garden at midnight, as soft as the moss between the stones. You are not striving, you are simply resting in the beauty of the present moment. Everything is slowing down. The garden is settling into a deep, velvety slumber, and you are drifting effortlessly along with it. The world is far away. The night is cradling you in its vast, quiet arms, and you are ready to let go of everything. You are calm. You are centered. You are completely at peace. Sleep. The garden path of our previous contemplation has faded into the soft velvet darkness of the night, and now we find ourselves in a space of refined silence, the Tudor library. Imagine a room lined with towering shelves of dark, polished oak, filled with heavy, leather-bound volumes that smell of aged parchment, beeswax, and wood smoke. This is not a library of modern speed, but a sanctuary of deliberate thought, where time itself seems to slow down to match the pace of a reader's heartbeat. The light in this room is sparse, a single candle illuminating a small wooden lectern. The shadows dance gently against the spines of the books, creating an atmosphere of profound seclusion. In the 16th century, a library was a rare, precious possession, a space where the noise of the world was effectively filtered out by the sheer density of human wisdom gathered within these walls. To sit here was to enter a dialogue with the great minds of the past, to participate in the long, unfolding story of humanity. Think of the stillness required to study in such a place. There was no distraction, no flickering screen, no demand for an instant answer. There was only the slow, meticulous act of turning a page, the soft texture of the paper beneath one's fingertips, and the patient process of absorbing a new idea. It was a discipline of the mind, a way to cultivate focus, clarity, and an inner depth that could withstand the pressures of a turbulent society. This library was a refuge for the restless soul. When the responsibilities of the court, the complexities of trade, or the burdens of daily life became too heavy, one could retreat here and lose themselves in the rhythm of prose. The language of the Tudor age, with its poetic cadences and elaborate structures, offered a way to express feelings and truths that were otherwise difficult to articulate. In these books, one found the reassurance that their struggles were not unique, and that their dreams were part of a larger, enduring heritage. As you sit in the quiet of your own space tonight, acknowledge the library of your own mind. It is filled with the stories you have lived, the lessons you have learned, and the wisdom you have gathered through your own journey. You don't need to read anything tonight. You don't need to solve any problems or seek any new answers. Your work is done and your library is closed for the night. Let the weight of the books, the stillness of the shelves, and the comforting scent of the past wrap around you. You are held by a history that is stable, secure, and infinitely peaceful. The candle is flickering out, the room is cooling, and the silence is absolute. You are drifting into a state where all your thoughts can simply rest, like books shelved neatly in the dark. Everything is quiet, everything is orderly. You are ready for sleep. The library has grown dim, the scent of parchment fading into the cool air, and we find ourselves standing before the towering window of a Tudor chapel. Even in the deepest night, there is a sense that the glass holds a memory of light. In the 16th century, the creation of stained glass was an act of alchemy, a process of taking raw sand, minerals, and fire, and transforming them into a translucent tapestry of colour that could turn the harshest sun into a gentle, meditative glow. Imagine the master glazier at work. Each piece of glass was cut by hand, its edges smoothed with infinite patience, and then bound together with leaden strips, the cames that provided both structure and form. It was a craft that understood the value of the fragment. They knew that a single jagged shard of blue or ruby red, when placed alongside another, would create something far greater than its individual parts. It is a profound metaphor for the human experience. Our lives are often composed of disparate, sometimes jagged pieces, our trials, our joys, our losses, and our triumphs. But when held together by the lead of our character and purpose, they form a radiant, meaningful whole. Think of the effect this glass had on those who sat beneath it. When the morning sun struck the window, the interior of the church was flooded with a vibrant, shifting array of colour. It was designed to lift the spirit, to remind the viewer that even in a world of struggle there is a fundamental brilliance that persists. It was a way of seeing differently, of looking past the grey stone reality of daily life and recognising the hidden, luminous possibilities within. This art was a quiet, constant reminder of the long view. The windows were built to last for centuries, indifferent to the shifting political fortunes of the kings and queens who reigned outside. They stood as witnesses to the generations that passed by, constant in their beauty and their promise. To sit in their presence was to feel a connection to something eternal, a sense that your own small daily efforts were also part of a larger, light-filled design. As you lie in the quiet of your room tonight, imagine your own life as a series of these coloured fragments. You have gathered them throughout your day, the gentle interactions, the moments of focus, the quiet breaths of peace. Let them settle in your mind, not as fragmented or unfinished business, but as the pieces of a beautiful, coherent window. You don't need to arrange them. You don't need to force them into a pattern. They are already whole. Let the light of your awareness soften and fade, just as the colours in the window dim in the moonlight. You are drifting into the deep indigo space where the light of the day is folded away. There is no need for colour, no need for brilliance, and no need for form. There is only the soft, dark comfort of the night, holding you in its warm embrace. You are safe, you are complete, everything is settled, sleep. The stained glass has faded into the shadows of the night, and the echoes of the Tudor world have settled into a profound, resonant silence. We have walked the gallery, sat in the cloister, and listened to the music of the stars, all to reach this final quiet threshold. In the end, the history we explored was never just about a time gone by. It was a mirror held up to the stillness that exists within you right now. Think of the journey we have taken. We have moved from the rhythm of the loom to the whispers of the garden, from the navigation of the stars to the patience of the written word. We have seen that the people of the Tudor age, much like you, were constantly navigating the balance between the demands of the world and the need for internal peace. They built their homes, tended their gardens, and looked to the heavens, not because they had all the answers, but because they understood the necessity of grounding oneself in the beauty of the present. You are now at the centre of that same grounding. All the parts of your day, the productive hours, the moments of reflection, the quiet triumphs, and the heavy burdens have been woven into the tapestry of your own personal history. There is nothing more to be done. The stage is empty, the fire is out, and the world has retreated to a respectful distance. You have earned the right to step away from the narrative of your life, if only for a few hours. Close your eyes and feel the weight of your body anchoring you to the earth, while your mind floats free, unburdened by the need to categorize, to analyze, or to remember. The history of the world will continue to unfold tomorrow, and the script of your life will be there waiting for you. But tonight, you are entirely released from its demands. You are not a merchant, a creator, a scholar, or a traveler. You are simply a spirit at rest, floating in the dark, vast and infinitely kind silence of the night. Let the final threads of the day dissolve. Feel your breathing become so slow, so deep, and so rhythmic that it seems to match the slow rotation of the earth itself. You are completely safe, wrapped in a blanket of time that stretches back centuries and forward into eternity. There is no urgency. There is no unfinished business. There is only the soft velvet dark. You have travelled far. And now you are home. The silence is perfect. The night is complete. Your mind is quiet. You are drifting now, sinking into the deepest, most restorative sleep you have ever known. Everything is still. Everything is finished. Rest now. Sleep. Sleepy History with Kevin is created for relaxation, entertainment, and sleep purposes. The stories shared on this channel are inspired by historical events, daily life, and real periods in history, but they may be simplified, adapted, or narrated in a calming way to enhance the listening experience. This content is not intended to be a precise academic or educational source. While we aim to stay generally accurate, some details may be altered for storytelling flow and relaxation. Please do not rely on this channel as a primary source for historical research or study. By listening, you acknowledge that this content is designed to help you unwind, relax, and fall asleep. Thank you for your understanding and support.